Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the regular Board of Trustees meeting for September 13th, 2022. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Hosback.
Here.
Trustee Hardy.
Here.
Trustee Sorcelli.
Here.
Trustee Murphy.
Here.
Trustee Ayers.
Here.
Trustee Butler.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace will be absent this evening.
All right, thank you. Next on our agenda is citizen participation. This is a chance for the public to come to the podium here and to speak to anything that is not on tonight's agenda. Anything on tonight's agenda, we'll have a separate section for that. So we do have a couple folks signed up. I noticed a number of these are for the ballot petition for annexation for the reservoirs. I'm going to have Administrator Kirk just kind of give an overview of that, because I know there's some, over the last couple days, been some questions about that. Can we just go over that first? And sure. Thanks.
Yeah, so just as a reminder, we were approached by the developers of the Heron Lakes community and in consultation with some of the representatives from the Handy Ditch Company Board about the possibility of annexation in the future in order to hopefully create a beneficial relationship between the golf course and the ditch company that might increase storage, might allow for additional golf holes to be built, kind of a whole host of opportunities there. As we explained in a previous meeting, there is a former ballot measure that requires any annexation outside of the 2004 growth management area, 2014 growth management area, which for all intents and purposes is anything west of County Road 19, has to go before the voters before the board can consider it. And so the request was made that we place an item on the November 2022 ballot, asking the voters that question. Should the town board have the ability to do that? There's no commitment as part of that ballot question. It doesn't actually perform the annexation. After the ballot, an annexation request still has to be filed by the Handy Ditch Company. It's just that the board can't annex unless the voters say yes. But it doesn't actually do anything beyond giving the board essentially the ability to consider the annexation. Does that make sense?
It does. And I'll call up folks just in case you have anything else you'd like to add or any questions we could clarify here. Thank you for that overview.
Sure.
We'll start out with Mr. David West. If you could, thank you, and thank you for writing your name down. If you could please state your name and address again over here at the podium. Thank you.
My name is David West, 4514 Lone Tree Drive, and I live on the west side of Lone Tree Reservoir. Mr. Mayor and everyone, thank you for letting me speak for a minute or two here. I moved here about a decade ago. I'm a retired professor of medicine from the CU Med School, and I came here to raise my alpacas and goats and grow some hay and some vegetables, and I'm a shareholder in the Handy Ditch Company. I got a letter from the Handy Ditch Company that wasn't dated, but it came to the house around the 1st of August, saying that there were some initial conversations, but no plans yet, but conversations around a partnership with the golf course and Handy Ditch, and looked at maybe considering some kind of an annexation for a project. But no action was being taken, nothing was moving, and we would be later informed about it. I wrote back on the 3rd of August to the Handy Ditch Board and their legal counsel, asking for some clarification on issues. I had a lot of questions about how does this fit with our overall plan? Do any of our board members have conflicts of interest about this? Have we thought about this all the way? Are there other partners we should be thinking this through with? And unfortunately, the board has never responded to any of my questions that I wrote, nor has the legal counsel. I've spoken with about 20 shareholders of the Handy Ditch, and we have formed a loose coalition of concerned citizens about what's happening here. We've seen in the last 48 hours letters from the golf course to the mayor saying that the Handy Ditch and the golf course have actually asked for this annexation to appear on the ballot. And you need to know that has happened without the shareholders' knowledge and without the shareholders' approval. It may be a really good idea. We have no idea as shareholders. We're told that there will be a meeting sometime later. I heard that it may be the end of October, but we haven't heard anything about it. But to be seeing something appear as a ballot initiative for the city of Berthoud to annex McNeil and Welch Reservoir, when as shareholders, we don't know anything about the plan, whether it's a good plan or a bad plan, whether we have the wherewithal to negotiate a deal in good faith or need to hire outside help. We simply don't know, and so fear is what's driving the day with the shareholders I'm talking to. And I was here to ask if there was any way to not have that appear on the ballot. Why are we in such a hurry? Let's talk this through carefully. Let's talk this through about what are the options. Handy Ditch has been around since before my grandparents were born. This ditch has a role to play in the welfare of agriculture, the farmers, and this valley. Let's think about how that all fits together with the proposals that are being made before we start voting to annex McNeil and Welch Reservoir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Mayor Parsbeck, if I may, just really briefly, and I appreciate the sentiment that's shared there. I think I'd like to stress again and make it really clear, this vote does not annex the property. It does not initiate annexation proceedings. It doesn't approve annexation proceedings. It only gives the board the ability to consider annexation upon request of the Handy Ditch Company. And so while the language of the ballot measure may insinuate that somehow this creates an annexation, it does not. So what it is really, and we described this at the meeting when the town board approved to put it on the ballot. This is kind of step 0.5 in 100 steps that have to happen before annexation. It's just giving the board permission to accept that annexation request and consider it. If the voters say no, you can't even make an the annexation request will be of no consequence because you won't be able to approve it anyway. So this is just saying, should the board be able to do this? And the Handy Ditch Company still needs to make that decision about filing an annexation request.
If I may, well, please understand too that the Handy Ditch Company is not one or two people. The Handy Ditch Company is a group of shareholders, and I would please ask that what constitutes a request from the Handy Ditch Company and that it be fully authorized and approved by its shareholders before it be any further considered?
Well, we received a letter from the developer and from, with my understanding, with general support of the Ditch Company. Not the Ditch Company shareholders, but again, this is not a commitment of the Ditch Company. And I'll remind everyone too that the town is a shareholder in the Handy Ditch Company as well, a significant shareholder. So we have obvious interest in protecting the ditch and protecting the reservoir and all of those resources like you described. And I don't mean to get into a back and forth.
No, and we don't need to do that.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear that this is not an annexation
When they say
proceeding.
the company requested this, the company did it without consulting its
I understand that. Yeah.
We hear that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mina Cox?
Mina Cox, 841 North County Road 19, Berthoud, Colorado. And it came to my attention and I had some concerns. And I've heard what Mr. Kirk has said, that this doesn't mean it's annexed. But it goes back to why even do this if the whole process is such that there's a request being made. The board is here, most of the board members of Handy Ditch. When I did the research, what I found out was there was a lot of misleading information that was presented. It's not a situation where Handy Ditch was in a position to support this at this point, nor were they understanding it was supported. I believe Steve is going to be presenting here that he had understood that this initiative could be pulled at any time once he had a chance to talk to the shareholders. There's information in there, and I'm really trying to still understand where in the process, unless you're serious about going after an annexation, there is no reason to have something put on a ballot and take the cost on of the taxpayers. But according to the information I saw, it says that Handy Ditch is going to help pay along with the developer help pay. It's in the packet. And So that is also a weird situation there. But even for the town to go ahead and go forward with doing an election when the people that actually own the assets may or may not want this to even happen. This is way premature, and we're in a position where at any point in time, according to the ordinance, if we do want to, ask for annexation, we can still come forward, pay for the election if we want to, and bring it forward. There's no reason to be in a big hurry. It's pretty obvious, and I think that I've asked the board members to come forward because it wasn't a board decision. It wasn't a shareholder's decision. It's not supported by Handy Ditch without that being fully done. And I feel that there was some misleading going on, and it should just get corrected. The other reason I'm up here is I had understood that the ballot is far enough along that it can't be pulled. And I'm like, well, if the people that were asking for this in the first place aren't supportive of this, why go to the cost to have all this election when people are not ready for this yet? And so that's why I want to bring the concern forward.
Thank you very much. I'm writing these questions down too, and we'll have Clerk Administrator Kirk answer these handy questions at the end here. Elizabeth Kearney?
Hello,
Hello.
Board of Trustees. It's been a while since I've been able to talk to you. Good to see you. My address is 1600 West County Road 10E. I'm the southern neighbor of Heron Lakes Golf Course, and I love Heron Lakes Golf Course. However, this arrangement that appears to be being contemplated at some level, and that's one of the things that confuses me the most. I don't even know what this is that is going to be an election issue. There's no annexation application. Handy Ditch hasn't approved it. The board didn't bring it forward as a unified board. There are statements in the packet from the July 28th meeting that Handy Ditch supports it, but those statements are in a letter from the developer. There's no letter from Handy Ditch in that packet. So I think that as Mr. Turner is a great businessman and he knows how to build golf courses and he wants some more holes. And I think he's very enthusiastic about this, but I don't think he has, all the boxes have been checked to actually have this go to an election when Handy Ditch hasn't approved it. And you can hear from the board on that issue, but as a shareholder of Handy Ditch also, and as a neighbor of the golf course, and somebody who would be directly affected by the schematics that I saw that you guys were given on July 28th, I'm amazed that it's at this point without anyone knowing, having any official notifications. That's the problem with it not being an actual annexation application. None of the surrounding property owners know anything about it. We haven't seen it unless we went and ferreted it out on the town website and pulled up that meeting packet. That's the only way you find out. So I would ask that this election be pulled because it appears that, and you will have to get verification from the board on this, but my understanding is that Handy Ditch is not asking for this. And Mr. Turner may be, but he doesn't own that property.
Thank you very much. Let's go down to Steve Anderson.
Yes, I'm Steve Anderson, member of the board of directors of the Handy Ditch. And I guess in this process, the board's going to realize that we kind of got the cart before the horse in this situation. When I was here before, in the meeting on the 22nd, I also spoke and intimated that we were just in the infant stages of this negotiation about this. And since then, we have sent a letter to the stockholders, and we have are setting up a special stockholders meeting for this. I think one thing that was missing in at least the notes, the public notes, the last time I was here, one of the main things that I did stress that it was just in the beginning, and that it was a stockholder's decision and not the board of directors. So the board of directors entered into this and are continuing to do this after we get this more input from the stockholders, because we see a way to vastly improve our infrastructure long term without doing it on the backs of shareholders themselves. Having some aid here. In other words, and it seems to me that the present golf course is a definite asset to the community and expansion of that. There are pros and cons to both of it, and I guess the thing is that since Chris last time expressed that there was it was just in the infant stages, that a lot of details had to be worked out about the annexation. Basically, what the ditch company was trying to do was get, or the board of directors was get a feel for the citizens of Berthoud thought about it. So this is, like I say, just in the beginning, and we have planned to address what Mr. West said, his concerns. We have his letter that he sent to us, and that's why we got and fit within the parameters of our bylaws. 30-day notice ahead, so our special stockholder meeting is going to be October 22nd. So I just wanted to intimate that the board is not trying to push this over on the stockholder, and that we very much welcome their input, and I'm sure there are pros and cons that we're going to hear about this thing, and we'll see how it progresses. I guess the annexation part of it, and wanting to see how the town felt was something that we thought we may have improved sure at this point, so always do with that.
Thank you. We have no one else signed up regarding this. Before we respond, does anyone else wish to speak on the handy ditch annexation issue? Sure.
I believe I did sign up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My name's illegible. Jeff Glover, my address is.
Oh, yeah, you definitely did. Thank you. Sorry.
12 South
No, it's very legible.
West of Berthoud. I'm also the president of the board of directors of the Dry Creek Lateral Ditch Company that receives its water from the Handy Ditch. I heard about that, well, I received the letter, as all Handy Ditch shareholders did, at the end of July. I did not realize that this issue, this question of annexation would be on the ballot until last night. Another Dry Creek Lateral board member informed me. And I would just mirror the sentiment of others that have already spoken, that it seems that we're rushing into this a lot faster than we should. There are many questions that all of us have, I'm sure, as shareholders. And why can't we take some time? One question that I did have personally is, assuming that we could postpone this question on the ballot, can we, how long would that postponement have to be? Assuming that shareholders are in favor of the annexation. Maybe the question is moot if it's too late to even remove it from the ballot, but that's all I have, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else? Okay, just real briefly, from my perspective, and I was working with Administrator Kirk on, so this was on an original agenda item sometime in July, and it was pulled because the members of someone on the handy board did not have a chance to notify, I believe through a letter, the other handy members, which I think was appropriately pulled. The decision, or the thought process was, once shareholders or board members were notified, it made sense for us to have that meeting. And that was not at all driven by the town. From my perspective, and I think from the trustees, or at least Administrator Kirk, this was to help the handy. And so we were up against a time frame, so we had that special meeting. And I can totally understand from talking to people last night and how that kind of comes off like we were doing some kind of backdoor deal in the afternoon. Apparently the audio video wasn't working, so there's no way to watch the meeting. But that was, the intent was in the handy's favor. I really, this doesn't matter too much for the town. This is really sounded like a great deal for the handy and for the golf course, but really to be able to dredge 1,000 acres, potentially 1,000 acre foot, and also an ongoing maintenance fee or fee to the ditch company seemed like a good deal for the shareholders. So that's why we kind of pushed that, and it happened on, I think, a Thursday afternoon. How this affects the town either way, the lake's still going to be there for us. I mean, I guess we see some extra dredging out there, but so I just wanted to stress, I think from my perspective, I think what I was trying to tell the other trustees is we were really doing this for the shareholders. And I was not under the impression that so many were not even aware this was going on, and that's really unfortunate how this all played out. And I'll turn it over to Administrator Kirk. I think there's some, unless there's anything else you want to add, there's some specific questions. Could this be removed?
I don't think so. The ballot was certified last week. So pulling it from the ballot now might be a challenge. So we, just as a reminder, kind of a timeline, you're right, we had it scheduled for regular town board meeting in July. We pulled that at the request of Handy board members who hadn't notified the shareholders via letter yet of what was occurring. In July, at the end of July, the town board voted to notify the county of our intent to participate in the election. At that point, we really hadn't committed. And there was still kind of a month of time where we were waiting to see how that would all play out. In August 23rd, I think, somewhere around there, the town board approved the ballot language during a regular meeting. And that was all subsequently sent off to the county. The developer is going to be responsible for the cost, not the Handy. At the time when we did the packet back in July, there was a question about who was going to be responsible. The developer is going to be responsible for the costs under our existing reimbursement agreement with them. They reimburse us for costs associated with their development. This would be one of those. And again, you know, I think you articulated it well. I don't know that this wasn't something that was driven by the town. I think we did rush to accommodate them because alternatively, again, because I think we all felt like, and I understand how others would misunderstand this, but because there's really no commitment at this point on behalf of the town or the ditch company. The developer is asking, at the time, with my understanding that the board supported that request, for us to consider the question. But again, the next steps are, if the ballot measure passed in November of this year, then the next step is for the Handy Ditch Company to petition for annexation, which they have to make a decision about whether or not they want to do that. And I think there's a whole lot of steps and negotiations that have to occur before they're going to be willing to do that. And I think with support of their shareholders, much like is being requested tonight. So I think when we brought this forward to you, there was really no commitment for the Handy Ditch Company or the town. It's almost more of an advisory measure, if we want to look at it that way. And if the vote is no, the board can't approve the annexation anyway. And so if the vote is yes, again, a petition has to be filed. All the annexation proceedings have to go forward. All of that needs to be done with support of the shareholders and at the direction of the Handy Ditch Company board. And none of those decisions have been made at this point. And so the risk we felt like was really minimal. And we brought that to you because of statutory timelines for the election that had to be done back in July. And if we didn't do it then, the next earliest time it could come in front of the voters was November 2019. So it was an entire year of delay. Now, maybe that's no issue. Maybe it takes a year for the Handy Ditch Company to negotiate a deal with the developer before they ever come and petition for annexation. But if that was the case, it may be that there was another year after that. And so our goal was to accommodate the request without any commitments,
So
other
that,
than the commitment of the developer to pay the cost of the election.
Mr. Glover's question of so it doesn't sound like we could, this can be pulled, but let's say it failed on the ballot for some reason. When's the next time, how long could it be postponed? So the next county election,
The
right?
next time it could go back in front of the voters and ask again would be November 2023.
It couldn't be a municipal election, right? Yeah.
Well, we don't have municipal election again until 2024.
Okay, and folks, I'm sure there's,
And we would suggest that you never hold a special election for this question. I mean, you could do that, but we would recommend for staff that you not do that.
I'll open up to trustees in case anyone wants to respond here. I'll just add real quick, though, I'm sure there's tons of other questions. I'd love to meet with anyone on the board, with Handy, and see if we can at least answer some questions for you. Any trustees want to add anything?
I have some.
Good.
You sure? First of all, thank you for those who came and shared your insights, because we don't have that perspective until people come forward. So I appreciate the concerns. That gives us a more well-rounded perspective of what's taking place. And I also appreciate the Handy Ditch board members who spoke and shared the intent and heart behind their actions and stuff during those meetings. And it's a shame if those meetings aren't public, because I feel like those were very robust conversations where we got to flesh out how this would benefit the Handy Ditch shareholders, and that was the motivating factor. And so I feel like it's too bad that that's not available, because that was really what was stemming a lot of that. And when it comes to the ballot measure, because it's not, there are times we make a hard set decision, but when it's a ballot measure, you're taking things back to the public and you're really getting their input on it, which is really, to me, what we should always be doing is how do we take an issue and go to the public and really ask what they believe and make sure that the communications are there, because if they're not, the communications aren't effective, the measure won't pass. And so it makes us step up our game in the community to make sure people know what the issue is and get them on board with it. So that to me is a good process. So I think the measure, even if we can't take it off now or slow things down, even if it gets put on there, it does provide us the feedback from the community that we need to move forward, and more opportunities for the shareholders to come forward and share their input, because that's obviously critical. So that's kind of how I feel about the process, and just knowing the intent behind it was, certainly there was nothing but concern for Handy Ditch in that whole thing. So thank you guys for sharing.
Trustee Murphy?
Well said, Trustee Saraselli. I just have one question for you, Administrator Kirk. Should the ballot measure pass and the voters approve of it, is there a closing timeline for the town to take up this question, or is it
No,
just
not
unlimited?
as I read the ordinance. That ordinance is not statutory, right? It's a unique ordinance that was adopted by the town voters. And let me see, I think I had it up just a second ago. But basically the way the language in that ballot measure was written, any future proposed annexation outside of, and I said 2014, outside of the December 2012 Berthoud Growth Management Area, again, for all intents and purposes, that's west of County Road 19, will be referred to the voters by the Berthoud Town Board of Trustees for voter approval. No future annexation will occur in the area outside of the Berthoud Growth Management Area as designated in December 2012 without a majority yes vote by the registered Berthoud electors. So that's really all it says. There's no timeline set forth. But again, without that vote, there's no reason to submit the annexation petition anyway. It could have been that they submitted the annexation petition first and then we put it on the ballot. I don't think that the ordinance specifies one way or the other. That would have been a fine way to handle it. I think in this case, we were trying to move forward in a quick way to get the voters' question, or get the question in front of the voters so that it wouldn't be another year delay before we could do that.
Thank you.
And again, even with a yes vote, the petition may never be filed.
And I think it's clear that the parties sort through this business if there is a yes vote prior to the board taking it up. So that's all I got to say.
Do you want anything? Trustee Hurst?
I don't have anything to add, but just to reiterate this on my part and for the rest of the trustees, right? We weren't trying to rush this through. We were coming up against a deadline, and I think we were under the impression that we were trying to do everyone a favor by getting it on the ballot so that the public could speak about the annexation possibility in the first place. For what it's worth, I apologize that there's been some sort of miscommunication between the shareholders and the board and the trustees. It was not our intent to do anything underhanded or to rush things forward without fully understanding the situation, although that seems to be what has happened. But the object was to try to facilitate that public discourse in a timely manner before we wouldn't have to wait that extra year. So for what it's worth, I apologize, but if it's on the ballot now, it is. So.
Anything else? All right, thanks, folks. We have more public participation here, but again, if there's any questions, just reach out to Administrator Kirk or myself or any of the trustees, and we'll try to answer what we can. Before I move on, I know one of them had one more question. Taxation, does this affect if that was annexed?
Yeah, I mean, any property annexed to the town pays property taxes levied by the town. I actually don't know the Handy Ditch Company's property tax status, but assuming they pay property taxes to the county, those would then be paid at the town's rate.
Okay.
But again, that's one of, I think, 1,000 decisions that the Handy Ditch Company board will make before they ever submit a petition to the town for annexation. which has not occurred at this point. They have not submitted a petition to the town for annexation.
Thank you, makes sense. All right, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to Sarah Lincoln. And Butch House.
My name is Sarah Lincoln. I live at 236 East Highway 56 in Berthoud.
Butch Hawes, same address.
And we're just here to give an update on the purchase of Newell Farm by the town for Newell Farm Park. Just to reiterate what happened, on August 23rd, the trustees, you, voted that we could go under contract for this purchase, and the closing date was set as January 2nd, 2023. So on August 24th, we received a signed contract by the town, and we're here to give you an update as to what's happened since and what needs to happen next. The earnest money was delivered on the 25th, and then we had several things that we needed to deliver to the town on August 31st. We delivered the title commitment and tax certificate from the title company, seller's property disclosure, lead-based paint disclosure, a due diligence document, which was the farm lease with our tenant farmer, because we had a 10-year lease, and the town will take that over, and other documents such as our homeowner's insurance policy. And the town had decided to purchase the water along with the land, so we provided a copy of the water certificate. That's what we delivered, and that was all delivered on August 31st. The next thing that we had to deliver was what's called an estoppel statement. That was, it was due on September 13th, and what it is an acknowledgement from the tenant farmer that he understands that when the closing occurs, the lease will become between him and the town, as opposed to him and us. And so he signed that, and we delivered that to the town on the 7th of September. So everything up to this point that is due has been delivered. The termination deadline, where the town can contest what they saw in that agreement from our tenant farmer, that's a week from this Friday, September 23rd. So if there's anything that the town doesn't like, they have until a week from this Friday to let us know. And then a month from this Friday, there is a deadline for the survey to be done. So if the town decides that a survey should be done, then that survey needs to be done a week from this Friday, I should say. Okay, so on October 24th. So there's a little over a month to get that done. And so one of our questions is, are we ordering that, and are we going to move forward with that? And one of the reasons why it's of concern to us is because we have donkeys and their pasture, and wire goes right against the border. So if there are going to be surveyors out there, we need to turn that off so that they don't get hurt.
We'll end up with some shock surveyors.
Yeah, so we'd be very shocked, and also the donkeys need to be managed during that. And after that, then the next deadlines, there are quite a few of them, which are on November 22nd. And that has to do with the record title objection, which is an objection to the title company's information, and then any off-record information that we provide, such as liens and such. And then the objection deadline for the survey, the water rights examination deadline, mineral rights examination deadline, inspection termination deadline, et cetera, et cetera. So there are a bunch of deadlines there. So that's it. We'll be back at your next meeting and let you know how it's going. If there are any questions, we'll gladly answer them.
Thank you. Fantastic concert.
Yeah.
Everyone on the board, everyone in the audience was super excited about this purchase here, so it's really cool to be a part of that. Okay, we have Mr. Paul Freaky.
Hi, Paul Freaky, 421 Colorado Avenue. I wanted to talk about the paving on Colorado Avenue. I know you guys got a lot of complaints because a lot of people kind of complained at me, but I couldn't be happier. And it looks good, and what I've been trying to tell people, is Chris and I have had a lot of conversations over a few years, and the sidewalk was not part of it. And to see them do that, man, I couldn't be happier, because it looked like a rental neighborhood before, and now it looks clean. I can see from one end of the block to the other. And no cracks, no weeds growing everywhere. It looks really good. And it looks like, I'm gonna assume that they did a good job, but I do watch them every day. And I had a cooler out there, it said quality H2O, and I went through about 5 cases of water for them. So, no, it looks good. The water flows really well from what I could see. On the corner, right on the corner of 5th, there's some things that they gotta do, but Keith was out there today with them, and we'll get it all straightened out. But man, I couldn't be happier, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Wow, I appreciate you coming in and saying that.
You got it.
Thank you to Keith for all your work too. Getting that all done. Great. All right, that concludes citizen participation. Before we move on to consent agenda, Deputy Town Administrator Olinger wanted to make an announcement and an update.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor and trustees. What I want to do is just take a minute to introduce you to our newly community outreach specialist position that we recently filled. This position is going to connect our town operations, what we do in this building and rec center, out in the field, as well as our events and things, and connect it with the community a little bit better than what we do now, as well, through social media and marketing, and working with our events and things like that, volunteerism. Miss Stephanie Horvath is here. She wants to either come up or stand up, your choice. That's Stephanie Horvath. She comes to us with an extensive background in marketing, public relations, and nonprofit work. She's held positions with, she's been some promotional tournaments with TPC Colorado, as well as marketing divisions with Cleveland Golf, with some of her background and her experience. She is a Berthoud resident. You may have been around her, seen her name. She operates a website that's Stop and Shop in Berthoud, that she does on her own, or believe, or maybe she has a team, but she focuses a weekly business on help promote them. She's done it for past 3 or 4 years. She also serves on the library board as well. You'll see her later tonight in the next agenda item, I believe. She did some work with the believe we want to get ahead of that, and she's transitioning, and we're very lucky, and she's part of our team now. So we just want to introduce her so you see her face and know what she does. So thank you.
Awesome. Congratulations, Stephanie. It's great that we pulled someone internally too, so that's awesome. Okay, we'll move on to consent. Do trustees have anything they'd like to remove from consent? Is there a motion to combine and approve consent agenda?
I'll move to combine and approve the consent agenda as stated.
All right, Trustee Murphy has moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Trustee Hardy has seconded that. Is there any final discussion on this? Clerk, may I roll call vote, please?
Trustee Ayers?
Yes.
Trustee Hardy?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Sorcelli?
Yes.
Trustee Butler?
Yes.
Mayor Kirkland?
Yes. Excellent. And now, on to item number 2, the Bowie naming proclamation. We'll have Mr. Ken Matthews, our Public Works Director, introduce that. Or the Water Resources Manager.
Now you got me confused.
We'll call it Public Works.
What do I do?
Ken is our Director of Utilities.
There we go, okay, all right.
No, I'm water use.
That's true.
Yeah.
Director of Wet Utilities, Water Utilities, you just make it up.
And I go by Public Works Director.
Okay.
So I know all of you guys and some of you folks in the crowd have been hearing a lot about this, so I'll be brief. When I came on board last year, one of the things that I recall hearing about Berthoud struggles was when water, when it's pulled from our reservoir, our Berthoud reservoir, has a serious taste and odor problem. So we immediately started looking at ways to fix that. We applied for a grant and in February, we got notice that we got partial funding for a proposed water quality treatment unit. It was gonna be an ultrasonic unit. In July, the unit we received it, we purchased it, received it, deployed it into the lake, and then Stephanie, whom you just met, had a great idea that this is a really odd looking thing out there, and there's gonna be a lot of questions. We need to try to find a way to have a little bit of fun and answer questions as to what this is. So she came up with this this outreach tool to come up with a name for the buoy. I think you've seen that in other things. In August, we launched the program to name the buoy. Had really good success. Had a bunch of legit names submitted. We shortlisted it down to 10. It was all kind of done on our website, and elementary school students were promoted to vote on the 10, and then we had a very good turnout on the votes, and there was the one vote that rose to the top, and that was provided by this young lady here. You want to come up here and stand? Yeah. And your name is Georgia. What's your last name? Hills. That's right, Georgia Hills. And so she came up with obviously a nice aficionado of classic rock and roll too, I believe, right? And so the name that you came up with was what? David Bowie. That's right. That's right. So she's won the contest, and we're going to put the sign that you see here there on the trail, so that if people look out and wonder, what the heck is that floating out there? Boop, there we are. That will explain it all. So there we go. Mayor Karsbeck, I believe you have a proclamation that
I
you
do.
mayors love to do, right?
Absolutely.
All right.
Georgia, on behalf of us, we've been talking a while about this and really excited on who's going to come up, and you had such a great answer. So thank you for entering, and congratulations on winning. So I'll read this out, I'll sign it, we'll give it to you, and then we'll have the whole board come out front for a picture with you, if that's okay. Okay, cool. All right. Whereas the water in the east cell of the Berthoud Reservoir often becomes cloudy in the springtime when the air becomes warm and algae bloom, and whereas the town of Berthoud applied for and was awarded an immediate needs grant from Larimer County to purchase an ultrasonic water treatment unit to combat said algae, and whereas said ultrasonic water treatment unit continuously clears the source of Berthoud's drinking water of algae blooms, and whereas many people are unaware of the fascinating technological advancements made in water robotics to help maintain optimal water quality, and whereas a contest was organized to find a name for this marvelous piece of technology while also sharing this interesting information, and whereas many names were entered into consideration, and from those 10 were selected for voting, and whereas Berthoud residents voted for their favorite buoy name, and David Bowie, submitted by Georgia Hills, received the most votes. Now therefore, by the powers vested in me as the mayor of the town of Berthoud, I do hereby proclaim the ultrasonic water treatment unit floating in the east cell of Berthoud Reservoir to be officially named David Bowie. Given under my hand in these free United States in the town of Berthoud on this 13th day of September 2022, and to which I have caused the seal of the town of Berthoud to be affixed and have made this proclamation public. I'll sign it. All right. Hand it over to you. Congratulations and thank you.
Too bad this is like steam over the hill. That's where you met Julie.
Should we move this to the center, do you think? Let's move this to the board.
Okay.
Georgia, I don't want, here we go. Oh, nice. Thanks, Jack. That's right. Put it right there. You turn around, face Stephanie.
Yes, yeah.
Very good, thanks. All right, congratulations, thank you. No, we can keep that. Thank you.
Steamboat name with the deputy James Brown, and he actually showed up.
We could email Dave through.
He's a little under.
We should play the song. That was fun.
Oh,
All right, let's move on now to item number 3, amending the penalty provisions in the municipal code. This is a public hearing, and this will be by Attorney Fred Long. Welcome, Mr. Long.
How's it going?
I'm very well, thank you.
Tough act to follow after that.
Yep, you're done.
I'll try and keep it short and sweet. This is nowhere near as fun as Henry agreed. The short summation of what this ordinance is for is, I was going through as prosecuting a trailer case here in the municipal court. For those of you guys who have not met yet, I've served as town prosecutor here since, I think, 2017. And as I got to the penalty provision, I noticed that it had our old maximum penalties for when we were not a court of record. And so I knew that we were probably going to want to update that to unify it so it's the same as the rest of our penalty provisions throughout the code. And while I was at it, I just ran a search on Unicode for essentially just 300, so I could weed out any remaining provisions that were missed. And so all this ordinance is doing is unifying our penalty provisions to come into compliance with the statutory maximums of $2,650 and or 364 days in jail for any of our municipal ordinance violations. So that's what this is for. I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys may have.
Thank you. So currently, it's not that amount. That's what we're doing. It's just bringing it all standardized to the.
Yeah. So like our general penalty provision already has the 2,650 and or 364 days in jail, and various other penalty provisions throughout the code have that as well. These were, I think there's 3 here that just were missed in the ordinance that ended back in 2018 when all of those went into effect. And so it's just bringing those into uniformity with the other penalty provisions.
Any other questions for Attorney Long?
Sounds more clerical than anything.
Okay. Seeing this is a public hearing, I'll open it up to the audience. If anyone wishes to speak to this, please come to the front and state your name and address for the record. Is there anyone in here that did not have a chance to sign up, wishes to speak to this? Seeing none, I'll close it. I'll close the public portion of the hearing here, and bring it back to the board for deliberation and a vote. Does everyone seem to be in favor?
Yeah.
All right, since we're all in favor, would anyone like to move on it?
I'll move to adopt ordinance 1308, an ordinance of the town of Berthoud, Colorado, updating fine and penalty provisions to correspond to those authorized for a municipal court of record.
Is there a second?
Second.
Trustee Ayers has moved on this. Trustee Murphy has seconded. Any final discussion? Clerk, we have a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Hardy?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Butler?
Yes.
Trustee Sorcelli?
Yes.
Trustee Ayers?
Yes.
Mayor Parsons?
Yes. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, trustees. And one quick plug now that we're through the hearing part of that. If anybody ever has questions about municipal court operations or anything like that, please don't hesitate to give me a call. Happy to answer those questions. And if you guys want to stop by, it's obviously public courtroom. So we have court on the second Thursday morning of every month. And I'll obviously be here and can address questions at that time as well. So thank you guys. Hope you guys have a good rest of your night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on now to the bike lane striping. This will be presented by Keith Knoll. And I'll get your title wrong. It's Public Works and Streets, or Streets and...
Public Works Operations Manager.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm bringing forth the bike lane striping. Mainly this is an update for the town board on the current bike lane striping plan, and also to receive approval to post this for public bid. I think we all understand there's importance for consistent bike lanes throughout town. that give cyclists the ability to traverse town and reach certain areas like downtown, town parks, schools, and commercial areas. So a little background, in 2020, town staff worked with HDR Engineering to evaluate our current roadways, and a lot of that is what roads we have, and then what are the widths of these roads, and where are these roads at, where to park schools and businesses. They created a guided tiered approach to complete the bikeways network, which is there on the right. I had Berthoud Parkway as tier 1, tier 2 included roadways near schools, and tier 3 included roadways along 4th and Welch Avenue. Through 2021 and 2022, town staff worked with HDR Engineering to create a more detailed outline of pavement markings, and I believe there was a board meeting where it was discussed for input on tier 1 and tier 2 improvements and to move forward with those as well. What we have now is a detailed outline of how this will look throughout the town with the signage and the markings, and that was included in the packet. It provided quantities for estimation purposes and allowed us to take those to the bidding process. Included is the streets there are, well, most of these streets are near schools. And then there's Berthoud Parkway as well added in there. So what we looked at as staff, and when we got our kind of the data compiled with the road widths, you can see we had existing road widths and the existing ways the pavement markings looked, and then if we added the bike lanes, what could we have? So I think in all cases we'd want bike lanes everywhere, but the road widths really tell us what we can do, and also if the roads have parking on them and so forth. So you can't always just have bike lanes. Sometimes you have shared lanes, and there's sharrows in them, and there's extra signage and so forth along those routes. What that looks like when it's detailed out is like this. Massachusetts was Avenue was a roadway we preferred to have separate bike lanes on, but with the street parking, it was not. We were not able to do that, so shared lanes are used there. To the right, you see 4th Street, which is wide enough to accommodate bike lanes, and then you can see the green pavement markings also there, kind of an accent. Things for motorists to see that this is a shared bike lane, or this is expect bikes to possibly be coming down this lane. Berthoud Parkway will be our biggest challenge, as part of this process is widening Berthoud Parkway, and that consists of basically taking the white shoulder lines we have now and extending them out 6.5 feet. So with this process, we have the stuff on paper right now. We're looking to get a contractor involved so we can work through more of these details, more of the complex things that will happen when we do try to widen Berthoud Parkway. Essentially, once we do that, we can start implementing this project. We're coming to the end of the season for paving and pavement markings. Those can be done throughout the winter times. We have a warm week. All those are consistent with rely on the temperature basically. So the goal would we get as much of this completed this year as we can. Some of this will likely move into the spring if needed, especially because we pave when the temperature's right. We put the markings down when the temperatures are right as well. Essentially, that's it. If there's any questions from you all?
I have a couple few questions. First of all, this looks awesome. Thank you. It's completely comprehensive, which is amazing. And none of these are sensors. I'm just trying to kind of figure out the process that went to it. On North 4th Street, how come the sharrows were not continued on the road? It seems like they stop south of Water Avenue.
If there's something, I'm trying to think of which diagram you're looking at, because sometimes if you're looking at Bunyan, sometimes it doesn't always show what's on 4th Street.
This is the one that follows 4th Street north out of town.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious, is there like
it should, I mean, I understand it should be there. From Bunyan to Water Avenue, I believe it turns into Sharrows.
Yeah.
And then that should continue then.
That should continue? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And I know future improvements will be down the road or will be talked about with light 4th Street right there, but
okay.
That's not.
Another question, once again, I'm just trying to figure out the history, but for a project like Berthoud Parkway, why does it need to be widened, I guess, and why wasn't it wide enough in the first place, I guess? I once again, this is not a complaint, I'm just curious.
I don't know why it wasn't wide in the first place, but yeah, at this moment, it can't accommodate. And I think it even has a little buffer in there as well, great, because it is a kind of a higher speed roadway. So
Portions of Berthoud Parkway are wide enough. The areas where new developments occurred, like up by Hammond Farm and adjacent to Vantage, there are spaces there that are wide enough. There are portions that are not. Adjacent to Wagner Farm, for instance, and portions adjacent to Vantage. Former town engineer that was here when I started generally had the policy that any collector roads or above were not the responsibility of the developer to widen, because we collect road impact fees that pay for a portion of the capacity improvements on roadways throughout town. That is not the case anymore. We changed our standards, but that was the policy at the time when Vantage was approved, which is why only a portion of it was widened, and it was only widened to accommodate turn lanes. So it's kind of a mix and match, but we require developments now to widen out to the full width of the road on their side. They don't have to widen the entire road, but they have to do their half of the road. What's adjacent to their development, that was the case then.
Okay, thank you. And I think final question I had, for any of the possible upcoming road work that's gonna be done, I'm specifically thinking about Massachusetts and Third and those streets. Is it, I guess, worth to do the restriping? Is the new construction or tearing up any roads gonna get in way of the new striping? I'm thinking about cost saving benefits of just not worrying about getting brand new striping on some of these roads before they're just torn up.
right, absolutely. So once we get the contractor lined up, we'll bring them involved with baseline engineering. They handle a lot of our development stuff, so they'll come forth with all what our developers possibly gonna handle, definitely. Because some of them are over on South Berthoud Parkway. There's development striping that's still being done down there. And then I have the road improvement project, so we'll talk about that. If it works as a timeline, it doesn't hurt we can see how much it's gonna cost to get the pavements marked, because then when they come back through, and maybe there's slurry seals or something going on down there, at least the road's marked, and then they can come back through and mark it again. And I get the same thing, like, this is kind of one of the reasons some of the Berthoud Parkway hasn't been striped recently, is because we thought we were gonna have this ready to go earlier, and now we're running into a moment where there's not striping on the road, or striping's wearing off, so.
Okay.
We're gonna have to go definitely this year to restripe some of Berthoud Parkway. Like Massachusetts, which has no striping, right, it doesn't make sense to stripe it 2 months later. So we'll look at that for sure.
Okay, alright. And once again, this all looks great. I think this is gonna be amazing when everything's finally all painted up, so thank you.
Question? Trustee Murphy?
Yeah, I think it all looks excellent. I have very few comments. It's definitely a long time coming. I'm very excited about it. The only thing I'd want to bring up, in addition to Trustee Ayer's comments, looked like we were kind of short on metal signage. Is there any way we can update those quantities? I wouldn't want to hold up like the bidding process for that, but it seemed like we were lacking, especially in the share road kind of areas.
Yeah, I mean, we'll look into, I think everything, that's kind of what the engineers put together, and then I can check on areas that might see that. So the share road is definitely, I think usually it says shared bike lane or something like that. I know there's moments where we added signage where a bike lane turns into a share road, and that there should definitely be signage there. It says lanes marked.
Yeah, no, that was kind of my comment. It looked like kind of those transitions had been addressed. It was just that you've got some long sections where there's like no metal signage for a number of blocks. But yeah, I wouldn't want to hold anything up, but I would be certainly interested in more signage of that variety, I guess. But
There are a handful of share the road signs throughout the project. We'll go back through and look and touch base with the engineers, just make sure that there's sufficient to meet engineering standards for sure.
no problem.
Right.
But
Yeah, and I don't expect it wouldn't hold up the project because it's going to be an add-on, and that's kind of how it usually works. We have it on paper, and then we put it out, and then we're like, okay, we need to add something here, so.
Okay.
Definitely pick it up.
no, I think it looks great.
I just have a quick question. And this will probably be more solidified once you have the contractor. But timeline, when we're talking about the different tiers, are you guys projecting for those to happen within a few months of each other or a few years of each other? I just kind of want a general sense of what financially you think we're gonna be able to do in accomplishing each of those tiers in one time frame.
Good question. So, tier three, what we kind of ended up doing is tier 1, tier 2, and then part of tier 3 in this combination. So we're kind of at this point, if we get this out for bid, we only budgeted this year to start this, and then we can cycle into the budget next year and just accommodate tier 1, tier 2, and this tier 3 portion of 4th Street's opportunity. And then I think the rest of tier 3 is, widening 4th Street, and I think there's some mulch improvements and so forth. I don't think we've moved on with having those laid out per se.
Yeah, a good example of tier 4 project would be First Street, which would require significant expense to accommodate bike lanes along First Street, for instance, and so that's why those end up as tier 4. So some of that is driven both by finances and then timing of other projects. But those are definitely the much more expensive ones. That's why they got pushed down the list.
We have MPO money grant money
Absolutely.
could certainly help out with that.
And that's one of the reasons why we prepared the plan in the first place, was so that we could, usually when you go apply for a grant, you don't want to spend all the money to do the design work up front. Sometimes that helps get the grant, most times it doesn't, but at least if you have a concept and you can point back to an approved master plan that says, we have a concept. So like First Street, we've got an approved cross section in the master plan. We have a master plan that went through a public process that had support of the community and the board. It strengthens our application to then go and ask for money to build it. And as part of that grant request, we would ask for design money too, to go through all the complex engineering designs for something like First Street. But that's why that was one of the main reasons we put the plan together. So we could do some of the low hanging fruit where it's really just striping and it's pretty inexpensive. And then set the stage for grant applications through the MPO and other state transportation grants.
I definitely think there's some push from the community to see some of that striping begin as soon as possible. So I think taking it in staggered approaches like that is good. And it'd just be nice to know when we do solidify a contractor what that time frame kind of looks like, so people can get excited about seeing bike lanes and kind of making plans on how they can go from here to there in safe ways. So I think it's a good project and it looks comprehensive and wonderful. So let us know how we can champion it.
Thank you.
If I may, not to belabor the point, Mayor Karsbeck.
Mhm.
But as a good example, on the trails side, we adopted the Trails Master Plan several years ago. And then we applied for a grant through the MPO for the South Berthoud Parkway Trail from Welch down to Bluebell. And that was funded in large part because we could point back in our grant application and say, we have a master plan, this is gonna help us close this gap. And then the same was true when we applied for the North Berthoud Parkway Trail grant through the state. And so we'll kind of use that same process. That plans help us get money. So we'll use the same process for tier 4 projects as we're able.
Right. I think it's great. I really am, like the other trustees, very excited about it. Just with the statistics, this will really help out, bring out hopefully more bikers, and it seems like the next step would be the protected lanes in certain areas, but I think we won't know where those will be or the amount until we have stripes in the first place. So I think this is a great start and really appreciate your work on this.
Well, I will say on Berthoud Parkway, the original plan was just to do bike lanes on the shoulder. But you may or may not recall, but Mayor Karsbeck did bring up the idea of buffered bike lanes along Berthoud Parkway. There won't be physical barriers, but there will be an 18-inch wide kind of striped median, hashed median with paint to kind of see how that works. And so we added a little bit of pavement and then designed and added those buffered bike lanes. And I think that was a great idea, and we'll see how those work and see where we can put it throughout the rest of town.
Those are kind of rumbly strips?
We talked about possibly delineators. We could also do like the raised reflectors that serve a little bit like rumbly strips. There's a couple different options. Those aren't great for snow, but neither are the delineators, frankly. So but we would definitely have a painted striped buffer between the roadway and the bike lane, and then we can talk about kind of see how that works.
Yeah,
and see
it works
if
if it
there's
doesn't.
additions we need to put in to make it even more visible.
That's great. Anything else from trustees?
Can't wait to start riding the bike.
Yeah.
This is great. We need a plan, so this is a good start. Obviously, it's a work in progress as this progresses over the years. The only comment, not to be redundant, is I just like to make sure this is strategic with as our town grows and traffic, triggers more improvements, and make sure this coordinates with that, so we're not being, wasteful and redoing things like, Trustee Harris mentioned. But we gotta start somewhere, so this is a good start.
We do, paint is always a great, it's nice when you do stuff with paint, because it's not inexpensive. It's relatively inexpensive compared to the other types of road improvements that we do. But paint wears off pretty quick anyway, and so, if it only lasts for 2 years and then you grind it off and change the road, you really didn't lose much because it's probably only gonna last 3 years anyways, and then you'd have to restripe. So paint's a relatively inexpensive investment, a good way to just get infrastructure down throughout town, so that's a good deal.
I agree.
I forgot to open it up to the public. Is there anyone in the audience that would wish to speak to this? All right, ma'am. If you come to the front, please. Yes.
Leslie Tassie, 945 North 4th Street. Yeah, I have some questions about these tiers from what I'm hearing now, and I hope I'm not hearing it the way I thought I was, is that 4th Street is down the line as far as tiers go, which means 4th Street won't be getting bike lanes for like another couple of years until further Parkway is.
I can address your concern.
Thank you.
4th Street was a tier 3 when we adopted the plan several years ago. As a result of primarily Ms. Tassie's feedback and some of her neighbors, we moved 4th Street up as part of this project. So it will be done with this project, not with the other tier 3 projects. Does that answer your question? Which is now.
Because now?
Which is now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations, Mrs. Tassie. Is there anything else? All right, bring it back to the board. I kind of cut you off. Did you have anything you wanted to say? I opened it up to the public.
Okay. No more dangerous riding.
Yeah.
It's gonna take all the risk out.
Yeah.
There is still risk associated with riding on the road, Trustee Hardy.
Yeah, there still will be, but a lot
Should be
less
safer.
risk.
Okay, sounds like we're in favor. You don't need a motion, right? You just
I would
want
like you to
to.
just authorize this to go to bid if you would.
Right, then, do you want to just move on? Anyone like move on that?
I'll move on.
Okay, Trustee Murphy.
Yeah.
I'll second.
All right, Trustee Murphy, you're authorizing staff, moving to authorize staff to go to bid on the bike lanes.
Correct.
Trustee Ayers has seconded that. Any final discussion? Clerk, we have a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Sorcelli?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Ayers?
Yes.
Trustee Butler?
Yes.
Trustee Hardy?
Yes.
Mayor Karspeck?
Yes. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, our final agenda item tonight is the Richardson Bike Park authorization, and this will be introduced, presented by Deputy Town Administrator Jeremy Bollinger.
Good evening, trustees, Mr. Mayor. So the item signs bike park. Presentation, just to start, maybe a little bit of review. This is probably the third meeting this year. We've brought it back to the initial first couple was last year, and begin the budget process, talked through it, designed it, had some more community feedback, your feedback, worked through a change in design to get away, to get further from some houses. on the southern border, make some changes to design that we heard from the community from a couple meetings as well as you all. The last meeting was, the design was good. Everybody seemed to favor the bike park. We had some last items of accessing, looking through southern access, as well as bringing back some budget numbers to see a total, kind of a total hard cost to building it. So that's what we're doing tonight. I'm gonna just kind of go through the design that you've seen before. Maybe not Trustee Butler yet, but we'll catch him up to speed fairly quickly. So pretty fun stuff until we'll have you at the end work through 3 options, and we'll discuss those when we get to the end about budgets, and those are in your packet. So what we're talking about is the bike park. The gold box to the left is kind of the area where the bike park will be, on the west side of Loveland Reservoir, the east side of 287, through Richardson Park. We've shown this before. This is kind of detailing the bike park. This is design. It's not, an engineer type design. It's companies and contractors that are. There's only a few select in the United States to do this. This is what they use. They kind of sketch it out like this, and this is kind of what you get is through the design. But what it shows is the trails you get, the skills courses. They got jump lines, they got return lines. They designed an acre pump track for us, as well as a bicycle playground. And so this is kind of a sketch, and on the left and then the right 2 photos are as closer as we get to identify that stuff. These are pictures again of the design, and the bottom are just kind of examples of what those be. Skills courses, what that looks like on the left. You get some of the low stuff, riding stuff to jump and blow off the ground, some challenging things. And then on the right is the jumps. There's a lot of board work, there's a lot of hill work, a lot of dirt work involved in creating those lines, and that's what that looks like. The pump track was, as we worked through design, initially we had an idea of a pump track. This is something that through community surveys and things that the Berthoud community wants. We thought that was great. This was a kind of, as we worked through this, a middle of the process addition. This is very favorable to the community on both sides of this project and plan, whether you're for or against, that they were all for the pump track in some capacity. Thought it was really neat if it could be done, depending on budget and those things. Basically, a pump track is they've designed it in the gray. We've opted for the asphalt. It sort of looks like the bottom right. The top right in this slide is the kids' bicycle playground, just for clarity, the context. So as we went through this design and we started talking and we heard back from the community, we had some community input of more things that, as we looked at design and how it can improve the bike track. And what came out of that was some more opportunity to make our track better with relatively limited budget money. And that what shook out was an idea of a dual slalom course. The folks cities are putting in with their bike parks as they put them in. And so we had an opportunity to kind of take this back and just design a little bit better bike park as we had some time. So we're showing a dual slalom course. And this is an updated design, not taking anything away, just making it improve and it fit well in our design and our property. And so just a couple examples, that basically 2 riders go down, you compete against each other, and you just go over and over and over. It's kind of like a dual race, and so you kind of, if you got friends or family or whatever, and we thought that was pretty neat addition. So we're showing it tonight, and as part of the design. So just to review the kind of comments from the public a while back, the neighborhood feedback with the vehicle access from Medlark, Medlark parking, events on the street, increase the traffic, safety and security. Generally, what we heard is the loitering potential, the overnight camping. They wanted park hours to not exceed certain times, and they were concerned when those would be, and the parking area proximity to the resident homes on the southern border, and of course noise levels. So the highlighted areas is what we felt as staff. We went back to the drawing board and kind of heard what they said. So we've moved it to the north. We've moved all the parking to the north. Staff in the town doesn't have any major regional events planned, and we don't anticipate doing that for a few years, mainly to get to the rest of without the rest of the park being developed, and hearing what the residents say, it's not a wise decision for us to do that. Safety and security, we've bid out cameras. We're planning for lighting, locking restrooms, and fencing. Park hours is dawn to dusk. We've also put in our plan a locking solar gate. We'll be able to get out if it locks at a certain time, say it's 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, wherever you so choose, and it locks, you're still in your in, you'll be able to push it and get back out, but obviously nobody can get in, without help. So the hope is to deterrent as well. Parking area proximity, we moved it 300 feet to the north. That added 100-some thousand costs, as you'll see later, and so we did that. We thought that was a benefit to those homes. And noise levels, we're going to try to support and help that with some sound absorption from some pine trees, evergreen trees, things like that, landscape burning. So this is the design we showed last 2 meetings, just to re-up what you saw before, showing the design. This is a conceptual that we changed, showing the 300 feet, but to the north movement. This is our current conceptual drawing, showing that we heard the residents and made those changes. Some of the things I talked to, these are just, again, conceptual. Actually, the bathroom is what we picked out. We'll put some stone. It looks very basic. We understand that. But we'll put some wainscot stone around it and things like that, and pick appropriate colors that match the area and things like that. But that's just showing what the forward and back of what it'll get. It'll be an all-season restroom with locking doors. The gate, an example of the gate, what the gate may look like at Meadowlark, that'll be open during the park hours, and we'll want to keep that closed so it's just not a raceway through there in the middle of the night as well. The signage that you'll see in the lighting, similar to what you see at the rec center, the Berthoud Reservoir, it will not be lit. I'm showing this lit, but it'll be similar to the reservoir sign as well. That's similar to the bottom left as far as signage. So we move to budget. So I provided 3 options, and these are not estimates. These are hard bids. We went through and we took this time to get as accurately as possible. These are bids, obviously, that may change or may not. We've gotten them over the course of the last 4 or 5 weeks, but they are, for all intents and purposes, as accurate as we can get them. We've got detailed bids on our project. So, generally speaking, each option is the same, with the one exception, and we're asking for a couple things, is to talk through an option if we're moving forward to building the bike park, and then just so we don't go through each one if you want to, but mainly what it is comes down to the pump track. The pump track added a significant number to our great amenities, significant number to our original budget. So what we did is I priced out 3 different options, and option A was what we've been talking about today. It was a full design, an acre pump track, which is in our current design, asphalt, rocks in the middle, and an asphalt moband, which is what they suggest, to keep bikes from riding through the middle and things like that. So we priced that out in option A, the full price. Everything else is the same, basically from the bonding, the clearing grubber all the way down for each option. Option B, we haven't priced out a smaller pump track. If we did like the pump track and it was a deal breaker, we shrunk it a little bit to do half size, and they gave us a half acre pump track, and you'll see those costs as well. And then option C is the full design that we've been talking about the entire time with no pump track. So this is just a one-sheet budget, so you can keep it all on the same page. So if you saw it in your packets, and you'll see the bottom line totals for reference. And I'm sure we'll get back to that. And so the pump track, while I'm out here in Boulder, comes up a lot. It's probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 times the size of what ours will be, but, you know, it's a bike park that people enjoy, and it's a good reference for us. They have a bike park down there, an asphalt track. So I just wanted to show you some more pictures, rather than me stand up here and explain it. Because this is one of the, you know, obviously the in each option, this is what we're talking about, as well as if your intention is to continue to build and construct the bike park. So I kind of rambled through that, I apologize. But if you got questions, that'd be great too, or.
For a quick point of clarification, Jeremy, you said Valmont's roughly four times the size, but you were talking about the bike park as a whole, not the
Right.
pump track, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just so we're clear.
Yeah,
I think their asphalt pump track is about a half acre,
half acre.
plus or
That's
minus.
what I'm showing here.
So that's kind of that middle option B.
Okay, so out of a half acre to an acre adds the 500,000 roughly, right?
It does, yeah. I mean, the asphalt pump track by itself is roughly $1 million, so half of it's about $500,000.
Questions for Jeremy?
I have a couple questions. The first one is when the concerned citizens talked about not having any events there, is there a way to regulate, make sure there aren't any large events that are hosted because it would impact that neighborhood directly?
Is there a way to regulate not having events there?
Like public, like large events, not public access, but
Well, I think the short answer is we control the events.
Yeah.
So I think we're all under the impression, from a staff perspective, there's no ability to hold large events there in the short term because there's not enough parking. So we couldn't do any events there until we built the rest of Richardson Park, which I think we talked about once before. And so I think there's some physical limitations to us holding events out there anyway. And then if the board says no events, which I think we would support and recommend, then we just don't allow events out there. The town is the one in control of the events.
and just for my recollection, because I'm trying to remember all the details of this, but when we build out Richardson, the rest of Richardson, there is intent to connect a parking and roadway to the bike park from the north.
Yes, yeah. Right now, we're intending to connect it all to have potentially a parking area on that north side that'll service, you know, other park amenities that come from the east from Brook Parkway, yep.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is, I'm trying to recall, when we approved the budget for this project, I remember it being significantly smaller, and then we talked about it expanding. Do we have the number of what we originally approved for this year's, or this project to cost, or what we would spend on it for this year, or the following years? I don't remember what that number was.
I do, but.
The original project budget was $950,000. We had an increase in expense associated with some of the changes that we've made. We've had an increase in expense as construction has gotten much more expensive over the last year. But our original budget was $950,000. So in any of these options, you will have to add money to the budget for next year. We have plenty of money in the budget this year if we start this year. We won't expend all of the money this year, but you would have to make the decision now knowing that we'll be adding money to the budget for next year to cover the remainder of the cost.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
Questions? Trustee Murphy?
I had a quick question. The position of the port committee is the understanding that they fully support an acre-sized park, budget allowing?
I believe so, that is correct. And there's support here tonight.
Acre size? Acre size pump track?
1 acre, yes, for the pump track,
The A option.
the option A.
Yeah, I
I
don't,
think we got it.
The size.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I
the
don't
port committee
recall.
wanted to see a pump track included.
Yeah.
So I think a half acre pump track is still an awesome pump track. A 1 acre pump track is kind of, we used the term world class before, at least as we understand it. I'm not a pump track builder, nor do I frequent pump track races and those kinds of things. But I mean, like an acre pump track is kind of at the tops of what you can build today, or what anybody would build. So I think a half acre pump track is still really awesome if that's something the board wants to include in the project.
So this doesn't sound like we're knocking anything off, have to push anything off on our Parks Master Plan or anything to create this, even with the A option.
Our suggestion is with even the lowest option, you get a comprehensive bike park, kind of soup to nuts,
Even with yeah, okay.
minus an asphalt pump track.
But if we
at
go
the lowest
option
option.
Right,
A,
if we
we're
did
not
everything.
If you do everything, you're not sacrificing anything,
Right, we're not pushing anything, other plans we have down the road or anything.
not at all.
A few questions.
Oh, I'm sorry, Trustee Butler, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I think I understand what the question you were asking. You're talking about not just this project, but the other projects. that
That's what I
are
meant. I'm
master
sorry, that was
plan,
my fault.
Like Town Park,
Right.
like the other phases of Richardson Park.
Are we stealing 500,000 from another project maybe to make this happen?
Well, it's kind of a zero-sum game, right? Like, if we choose to spend $500,000 here, it has to come from somewhere. I do think we have the ability to do the projects that we have on the near-term horizon and this full option, if that's something the board wants to do.
So it doesn't delay any start dates for town park construction or
It
anything?
should not, no. Again, I mean, I've used this term a lot. You guys will hear me say it again in a couple months when we do the budget. We're not broke. We just have to decide where we want to spend our money, so.
One last question based on that. Is there any way to have a tiered approach similar to the bike lanes with this, in that if we like option A, but we're not ready to approve that full sum, could we commence the project and then take it in stages down the road, or does it have to be all done at one time?
I think that all of the backbone work will be done as part of option C at the lowest level. The pump track itself, at least as I understand it, could be built anytime in the future. If you chose to say, hey, let's do option C, we'll go through the budgeting process, and then we'll decide if we want to add it in. That may increase the cost of that because we may be talking about a second mobilization. We may be talking about change orders to an existing project, which are never cheap, just because that's a contractor's opportunity to negotiate a better deal. We may be talking about increase in construction costs or materials, or we may be talking about a decrease in construction costs and materials depending on timing. So you just, anytime you push it off, you run the risk that it might be more expensive in the future. But we can build the bike park, we can build the parking, we can build the bathroom. All of that backbone work gets done as part of option C. And then in the future, if you want to bring the asphalt pump track and set it in, that area is still reserved for that. We're not going to build something else on top of that instead. And so we could bring the bike park builder back to do that at a later date. Or maybe even within the context of the project, depending on timing, we may be able to just change order back in. But there's a risk that might be more expensive when we do that.
Yeah, that was my question, is, going back to the parking lot that's designed now, how many, and I'm a little late to the game with this discussion, so I'm catching up. How many parking spaces are currently included with the new revised plan?
I think,
About 30.
yeah, about
30 to 30.
It's soft surface parking,
Yeah.
so, a lot of that depends on how much gravel we want to put down.
How well people space shield.
Yeah, and we'll add concrete parking bumpers that kind of delineate parking spaces, right? So it's kind of clear how many there are supposed to be. But you're right. In a soft surface parking arrangement, sometimes you get fewer parking spaces. People just park wherever they want.
Right.
But it's also really easy to expand and relatively inexpensive if we feel like it's overwhelmed, and there's not enough parking.
Right, so that was my next question, is with option C, to me, it looks like we're getting the backbone, in words,
Sorry, excuse me.
with the opportunity to add the pump track later and/or, expand the parking. So we have just more flexibility, I think, down the road. And then timing-wise, Richardson Park, will get built in the near future, and we could add some of these improvements at the same time for some cost effectiveness when efforts are on site. Does that sound correct?
Generally speaking, I think the one caveat I'll offer, and I think from a staff perspective, I don't know that we have a real preference one way or the other. We think the pump track's cool. We think we can afford it. It is a big chunk of change. And so if we want to wait and just see how that works in the context of all the other priorities the board has during our budget process, that's fine too. Because I will say, this project will be funded primarily with park development fees. If we are to add the pump track, we may have to pull from general funds, which is not a problem. We have a very healthy general fund reserve. And prior to having a significant bank for park development fees and the 2019 1% fund, all of our park improvements came out of the general fund. That's where our parks department is housed. So that's no issue. But we'll pull from a variety of funding sources in order to build the pump track, if that's something the board wanted to do now.
Got one. The gravel road and parking lot, what's gonna be done for the edging to keep people from just kind of parking in the natural grass areas?
Yeah, so what we got bid out is you see a trail here on the left, but we'll have split rail. That goes from basically the entry at Meadow Lark where it ends all the way through up to the parking.
Okay.
We bid out split rail to kind of deter them. It's not in the bid, but we've talked about other fencing possibly once we get going to see how it, what we don't want it to look is institutional. We want it to blend into the neighborhood. Obviously, we listened, and we want to make people happy. We talked about other fencing options, but it may shake out once we get going with the neighbors down the road, feeders, and those types of things to keep people and to be respectful of the southern border. But split rail is the answer along the road.
You run split rail along the roadway to keep people from
Much like
diving
the
off and go wherever they want.
Reservoir is a good example.
Yeah.
You know, if I may ask, generally, how much more, I don't know if you have a number to this, to accommodate, you know, some of the resident feedback, especially they're, you know, boarding this park, how much more has been added to the cost with this current proposed budget to accommodate, you know, moving the parking lot and adding landscaping buffers and so forth? Do we have a number?
Yeah.
We were always going to do some sort of landscape buffer, and it might be sized differently now because we have more room or opportunity. But generally speaking, just to move the parking and utilities and infrastructure was just under $100,000 or so added, just to go to the 100 more feet that we were before.
Okay.
About 100,000 added to just, we're talking about water line, road.
Yeah, just the basics.
Hookups to the bath, restroom, and we did a different pump system.
But we did, as a result of the feedback, that's why we decided to add in a bid for split rail fencing, kind of contain folks to the north, right? So as you come in the road, you're not tempted to wander south towards the homes. So that's an addition that isn't included in that 100,000. Like Jeremy said, we'd always planned some kind of landscape buffer, but I think we're talking about a slightly larger area, maybe potentially more trees. So there's some flexibility in that number, but the infrastructure work is probably just under 100,000. I think it was 98 something, if I remember right off the top of my head.
Okay.
And for what it's worth, I think from a staff standpoint, we actually think it's a better project
Yeah.
as a result. We intentionally put the parking lot close to Meadowlark. It frees up some space for additional bike park development south of that ditch in the future. But our original intent was really just to save money and keeping it close to Meadowlark. But I actually think it makes the parking lot more visible because it'll be out by 287. So it'll be really visible from 287. And I think it actually just makes a better project overall. So in the end, I don't know, it certainly costs more, but I don't know if it's a bad decision. From my perspective anyway, for what that's worth.
I think the plan's great. That's all I have.
Other questions? Okay, thank you. I'd like to open it up to, it's kind of like a hearing, but I'd like to open it up for citizen participation. Anyone in the audience tonight would like to come up and speak to the front, if you please state your name and address, keep your comments at 3 minutes or less. I don't think we had a sign-up sheet, so just feel free to come forward.
Hello, board. I am Carolyn Hobson, 817 Greenwood Drive.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to say kudos to all of you and town staff. I think you really went above and beyond to make the residents happy. I know that they're not getting everything they asked for, but you did make significant changes and literally go back to the drawing board to accommodate them. And obviously, it increased the cost and set the project back. So I just want to say, good job listening to the citizens. And I'm hoping for option A if anyone's wondering.
Thank you, Carolyn. Anyone else in the audience wish to speak to this? Do we have anyone online, clerk? Oh, we got some, okay.
This
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, didn't see you at first.
Anyone else want to speak? No? Okay. First of all, thank you all for your service. It is a lot of work and a lot of time, and I hope that the citizens appreciate the thought that you've put into this process. And you really have listened to the concerns of the neighbors, and you have made adjustments, which, you know, some of them really, as you said, could be really positive. For example, moving the parking lot closer to the highway gives it more visibility. This is me speaking as a citizen, but having been in your spot previously. Do it now. Do the project now. Do the whole thing. Do not do parts of it and hope to come back later on to do the rest. That's how we get partial things done. That's how we have empty fields with weeds in them, because we didn't go ahead and do it right from the get-go. So we do have the funds. You do have to take away money from one thing and put it in another. However, the cost now is always going to be less than the cost in the future to come back and do it again. So that's my first point. Second is, don't rule out events in the future. And I say this for some particular reasons. The gate on Meadowlark is an excellent addition. And for big events, we're going to have big events with soccer tournaments. That's kind of something that's really a reality for our town based on the number of soccer fields, multi-purpose fields that we have. We could host tournaments. Baseball, softball, we will have enough fields to hold tournaments. Those are going to be on the other side of this park at Richardson. Now, the large parking area is also going to be on that other side of Richardson. So consider this, that if in the future, when the other part of Richardson is done, for a large event to attract people to our town who will come, spend money, and then leave afterwards, economic engine, close the gate at Meadowlark, put up no parking signs, ticket people who do park there, and make people who are going to that tournament park in the large parking lot on the other side of Richardson. So I would say definitely don't make it a condition of, pursuing this, this bike park. There are options, and there are lots of good ways to figure it out, but wow, what a great amenity that will draw people from out of town to come here, spend time here, spend money, drive economic development, and then they leave, and we have our nice quiet evenings. As far as access from Meadowlark, the land there could have turned out to be a bunch of houses. It could have been sold to a developer at some point, and then we'd have 500 homes up there, and we'd have that massive amount of traffic going up Meadowlark. So in comparison, this is really tremendously better than having a housing development there. So I think that the neighbors should feel fortunate that they have a park that is going to be used in a very minimal way overall, but instead of a housing development. And
Estelle, we're hitting 3 minutes here.
Sure. So in any case, my last thing I'd like to say is there, as trustees, sometimes you hear some very vocal people, but they are a minority. And as trustees, you have to make the best decisions in the town for the majority. So there might be 100 minority voices who are very insistent, but remember, we've got over 11,000 people in town, so make the best decision for the majority in town. Thank you.
Thank you. And for the clerk, could we entertain me and give me your name and address, please? Sorry.
Maureen Dower, 1608 Hollyberry Street.
Thank you very much.
Within walking distance of this Meadowlark.
Is there anyone else in person here tonight? Click, do we have anyone online?
Mayor Karchback, there is not anyone requesting to speak.
All right, bring back the board and have Jeremy come up front. Any final questions, trustees? We can just go down the line and a few thoughts. We'll start with trustee Butler, we'll go left to right.
Well, I really appreciate all the feedback from staff and residents. And I guess my only question at this moment is led from Port Committee to staff, what is that recommendation of these three options?
You know, I don't know if I have time, if you're asking me, I support the port decisions, and their discussions. Chris and I have discussed it a long time. It's been the better part of 3 years again for me, I know, I'm trying to, so it's a great opportunity, a great project. I'm generally conservative with spending town money. I think there needs to be a pump track, I don't know. I get caught up acre, half acre, I don't know. I mean, there needs to be a pump track of some size. I'm hung up on the acre and the half acre. I don't think it needs to be delineated that way, but that's the way they designed it and bid it. So I think, generally speaking, there needs to be a pump track in there. But whether that's option A or option B, I have a hard time spending $2.5 million, but I know it's a great, when you do it, it's harder, but when you see it and it's done, it's the easiest decision you made when you see people. It's kind of like the rec center, and we put the skate park in later as we were building that, and that's one of the great amenities, that whole property, that whole campus, and not a dollar, in my opinion, was wasted in that project, and this is probably going to be another one for the community. So that's mine. I know I didn't give you a straight answer, but
That's good. That's a good example too, the skate park.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, any other final questions for staff?
I just have comments.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's do comments too.
This has been a really cool project to watch unfold, and I think you're right that the citizen feedback has enhanced what you guys have done, and I think that's, thank you for being willing to modify. I still feel a little bit of tension for their sake about how this will impact the citizens, and I don't think a minority is not important. I think there is some importance, so I appreciate the modifications to accommodate their concerns, and the fencing and all of that, I think is important. My biggest concern is process and budget. When something goes to budget and it's approved, that's a proper procedure for something, and when we're talking about an amenity that's not a need in the community, it's obviously amenities add tremendous value, and this particular one, I absolutely love, but I want to make sure we're taking proper process for the approval of something of this dramatically different from what we originally approved. And to me, the proper process would be to either take it in stages and go forward with what we approved, or to just be mindful of how much we're spending in Himflux in addition to what we approved. So I have to think like the citizens in the sense that there are issues in the community that may not be in the same budget bucket, but when they see us improve an amenity at 2.5 million, I could just hear citizens say, well, why do I break my car driving across the railroad tracks on Mountain Avenue? But we have this $2.5 million amenity, right? Like, where are the needs being addressed prior? So even if they're in different buckets, I understand that, but I think we really need to think about how much we're spending in addition to the budget, and understand that the way the public perception could really put a damper on how amazing this project is if we are approving such a big increase. Does that make any sense? I'm trying
Yeah, it does.
to process that out loud a little bit.
If I may, Mayor Karchbeck, I agree with trustee Sorcelli in that regard. I also feel a lot like Jeremy in that, he and I are both pretty conservative generally when it comes to spending money. So both of us are having kind of a hard time saying, yeah, let's spend $1 million on a pump track. In In all scenarios, though, you'll have to, if you approve option C, you will have to be spending more money than we budgeted. And again, I think some of that is, we've had some scope creep, right? That we've made some good changes. And we've had increases in costs beyond what we kind of originally, conceived of 18 months ago when we picked that number. But in all cases, you'll have to, in order to approve something tonight and direct us to move forward, you'll have to approve more than what we budgeted. And that's okay. Just from a practical perspective, the board makes those decisions. And so.
At what point were you talking about reaching into the general fund? Because that kind of gets to the railroad track type thing.
Yeah, I think, in a full option A scenario, I think
That's when we're
that
at.
additional $1 million would be too much for us to eat out of the park development fee. I think we can fund option B out of park development funds, and we can certainly fund option A.
And so the difference would be from the general fund around 500,000.
Approximately. And we could prioritize money out of the 2019 1% fund. It's healthy as well. Even with our debt service associated with the rec center and our operational costs there, we still have several $1 million in the bank. And we could pull from that. We are setting that money aside for town parks, so I'm hesitant to.
What about the 98? Is there any room in that one?
There's plenty of room in the 98 fund, and it can certainly pay for park and recreation improvements as well. So it doesn't have to be general fund. Again, we've got a handful of very expensive park projects planned for those two 1% funds. Primarily the 2019 1% fund, but having to draw a little bit from that 1998 too. So Town Park is probably a $6.5 million project today. It was about $4.5 million when we started. Most developers will tell you their costs have doubled. So from 4.5 to 6.5 doesn't feel as bad. And then Richardson Park, we would still love to build either an outdoor aquatics facility or a sports field complex. The design that you'll see very soon, we're at the schematic design kind of completion phase. So we're ready to kind of roll that back out for the next round of public feedback. But it's being designed in kind of two easy phases. Sports park or aquatics, probably not both at the same time because that's a $30 million endeavor. So we do have a couple of big projects. That's why I'm always hesitant to put that extra money in. My recommendation would be that if you want a pump track, we certainly go with option B and not option A. It can always be expanded in the future. But if you spend all that money today, you just, part of my concern is that the future looks very uncertain today, financially. Not for the town, but for the world. And so I just don't know how that's going to impact us over the next 12 to 18 months. And that's a lot of the conversations we're having as part of our budgeting process that we will have with you as part of our budgeting process come October and November. So when I'm not really sure what I think the future is going to look like, I'd be more conservative.
That's Trustee Harris, do you got that?
I have a couple questions and some thoughts, yeah. Can you give me an estimation? I understand that this is probably pretty difficult, but can you give me an estimation as to what the original proposed project would have cost at the presentation today based on the 1.5 of the no pump track? Because you said the improvements were about $100,000 for the new infrastructure because of the design changes, that sort of thing. But with the inflation and the increased costs of construction, what could we have been expected to pay over the $950,000 that was originally budgeted?
So, I don't know if I'm giving accurate,
Yeah.
but when we initially budgeted a year ago, so it's gonna be a year ago, we budgeted a pump track, or not, not pump track, a bike park. We didn't, budget an all-season bathroom and that, we didn't budget, the cameras, the lighting, it was a very basic design, and we've come a long way with input, right? And that's how kind of the process works. So the 950 was based on building the bump, that you see here on the left, on left without the pump track below and the bicycle park. Everything. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but everything here.
Okay.
We designed basically a dirt bike park with jumps and things like that, that's our original design.
Mhm.
The 980 or the 950 came of that. What came later and increased the budget was obviously increased project costs with building and all-season restroom changed, moving it changed, putting in fences, longer road, putting in lighting. We had ideas to do that, but we had our own personal estimates. But once a year came around, obviously those costs have come a long way just in a short year of what those things cost and what those things cost to install. And so a lot of those costs that you see differently weren't major changes to anything design-wise or what we included or didn't include. It just basically came from the process, I think, the additional monies.
I think that's a reasonable way to describe it. Our original scope, when we started conceptually, was even less than what we brought you a few months ago.
Mhm.
And so, through port committee feedback, through the design process, even just a lot of internal discussions, like the idea of going to a 4-season restroom. We're going away from 3-season where we have to close them in the winter because, in January when it's 50 degrees outside, people want to be out on their bike. And so, and we get those days, right? So we want to have bathrooms that are accessible. So we thought a 3-season restroom, which is less expensive, doesn't make sense. So it's just a lot of that design evolution throughout the course of the project. And when we brought it to you at the time, it was prior to our mid-year budget adjustment. So we kind of expected that we would decide on what the appropriate level was, and then you would make that mid-year budget adjustment. We're now past that, and so your alternative now is to say, if you want to do this, we'll make the adjustments when we adopt the budget for next year. And from a timing perspective, we won't spend all of this money between now and the end of the year. It's just the construction process will take too long.
Yeah, so I guess the reason for my question is I think there's a lot of concern with the original number of 950 and now the minimum cost is going to be 1.5. Would it be fair to say that with the upgrades, et cetera, which are all good and they're all community feedback, it would have been up to about $1.25 anyway, with $130,000 bathroom, $100,000 to move the infrastructure. So I think there's a lot of concern about the overall increase when I don't think that it's fair to use that sub 1 million point value to base the original judgment on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I'll point out is that, oftentimes when we budget, we're doing that based on very rough concepts and estimates. And so, as you get into the design process, you have to make some choices about what the appropriate kind of finish level is. And that can have really significant cost impacts. And so, and sometimes it's just a guess. I mean, legitimately, I think we've told you that, our water and wastewater master plan is a good example. We guessed $150,000 based on prior master planning work that we've done, but not based on bids or proposals. And then when we solicited proposals, the cheapest one was close to 300. And so, it just, sometimes you miss it because you're making an educated guess. It's not like we just pull a number out of the air. But sometimes you miss it by as much as, 100%. In this case, I think we missed it by 50%. But again, I think that was driven largely by, design, cost increases associated with construction, changes we made to the park. But I think your point is fair that even if we didn't make those changes, we'd probably be looking at a $1.25 million bike park.
As a base level.
As a base level.
Right. Okay, thank you. My next question is, you said that the pump track in the Boulder facility was about a half an acre?
That includes area around the pump track. The actual asphalt itself is less than that, but just kind of that space.
Okay. Do you have any idea if in the future, long-term, one way or another, if there were some sort of, even if it were just a local gathering, a local event, something like that, how many people would you say that Boulder facility can accommodate with it being half acre or less of pump track space?
You mean in terms of like an event or just like people out riding?
Both, either both.
Yeah, I mean, I think, in general, I would say even if a pump track of that magnitude, you wouldn't have more than 6 or 8 people on it at a time. It's big enough that you kind of spread out, let somebody go and get some space, and then you could drop in behind them. For an event, an outdoor event like that, it just depends on crowd size. Outdoor events don't have capacity restrictions generally, right? So unless you put in bleachers or something else of that magnitude, so it could be as popular as it was.
I'm just trying to get, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and so we took the parking too for them, in their original Belmont Park, they've done a lot of great additions over the years. But when they started out, you can see where they started out in their parking lot, we counted roughly 40 spots for their initial bike park, which I think was started out around, I don't know what it was, 10 or 12 acres, much like ours. So we're doing 28 to 30. But now, obviously, they've expanded, they've put in bike parks, they've put in skate parks, they put in pump tracks, they've expanded playgrounds, and now they have a second entry. And they've done, I don't know, close to 80, I think, additional parking spots in it, much like ours. They had initial side they were coming in on, and that was 40 spaces. And then their new parking lot on the other side is close to 80, but they've expanded to almost a 28 or 30 acre.
And it's a dedicated bike park?
Yeah.
Okay, so it doesn't have fields or anything like that
No,
associated with it?
they have a very large dog park there. They have 2 very large skate parks. They added the asphalt pump track. That was a later addition. So they've added some really significant amenities to that park.
Okay.
That certainly necessitated extra parking.
All right, that's all my questions. As far as comments go, I mean, obviously, I'm supportive of it, and I think, I understand the concerns of the neighbors who are worried about traffic. But I think that through y'all's presentation, that the traffic can be contained and controlled to a degree that's not going to really affect the road really as much as whatever commercial district ends up going down in that area. I think that attending the port committee meetings and attending and hearing people speak about the bike park, I think it's important to a large majority of the people. I think people are looking forward to it. I think that we have a focus on parks and recreation, and I think this is in line with that focus. I like either option A or B. I honestly think that if a park 4 times the size of the one that we're planning only has a half an acre, I think that an entire acre might be a little bit overkill. But I do think, based on your recommendations and based on the Port Committee recommendations, I do think that a pump track is needed if we do move forward with the project, which I support.
Cool. I'm a fan of all of these. Just from being on the board here and seeing, even if my side there was a side against the rec center, I think there was always an acknowledgement of, hey, at least the town and at least the proponents are going for the full thing. And in hindsight, even that full thing, now we look at the rec center, or we look at the skate park on some days, my nephew was just out there, it's crowded. And so I think if we look at option A and we're looking at the difference between option A and B in pricing, it looks significant. But I wouldn't want to be at that point and seeing this thing crowded and wondering, dang, if we just threw, it's not a little bit more money, but it's a significant amount more. But what could that have done? And sure, we could have always gone back, but just like what happened with the rec center, because that COP went early, and you look at what inflation would have been, we would have paid significantly more. So we made a big savings by acting when we could. So from my experience, I guess, from going through those initial recreation stages, I guess I've learned to part of me just wants to just go for option A. That way we'll know. And we can always grow into it. If we're wanting to attract people here, not only our own residents, but having other people come, I think you'd want to go for the maximum you could. So in my opinion, I just kind of want to push for A, but obviously I would go for all of these. So. Any other thoughts?
Yeah.
I have to agree with you, Will, because it seems like growing up here all my life, it always seems like by the time we build something, it's built for 10 years ago and we're behind already. I like to build so that we're ahead of it and then we grow into it. So that it's not costing us more later to make it accommodating. Because I think the cost now is minimal to what the cost would be later.
Thank you.
Trustee Murphy had some thoughts.
Yes, Chair, go ahead.
Just to look at this, it's been a long process and I appreciate staff for working through it with the public, with us. I certainly feel the gravity of this decision and the weight of the money that's being or proposed for this project, for these bids. I'm also very wary of the residents on Meadowlark. I think we've made good accommodations, but I think that's something we need to be aware of continuing on through construction and finalization of this park, if we do go forward. But I think regardless of which option we're looking at currently, I think the option we do choose tonight is the one that will likely exist on into the future. For one, when we do commit to construction for one of these options, we're going at it one time. If we were to come back again, there's obviously construction impact on the neighborhood if we have people operating on Meadowlark in the future. The second aspect is construction costs are high now. They will likely be higher in the future. And obviously there's some nervousness, with the state of the world and where things are going. But I fully support a pump track. I think option A is our best option because we're going at it all at once. We can certainly grow into it. And we really have a chance to do something really special and unique that stands out, not only in our region, but in the state. It's going to draw people from the Northern Front Range, from elsewhere in Colorado. I think it's something that really can put Berthoud on the map for biking. And I think it's wise of us to go forth and go with the full option and utilize the space that's available in this park for that use fully. So that's all I've got to say.
Well, anything else? I mean, what we're gonna do, we could just do is go down the line A to B on a motion, A, B, C. And don't feel bad if you vote no. If you don't like an option, you want to vote for the next step down. That's not a vote against recreation or a vote against the pump track. But I'm just trying to think of a way to do this. Does that sound fair to everyone? To start with.
Sorry, Mayor, I have another
Yeah, go
question now based on Trustee Murphy's comments. Is the concrete of the pump track conducive also to skating, rollerblading, scootering, et cetera? Is it all the same asphalt or is it some sort of special blend? So skaters can use it?
Yeah,
et
it's
cetera?
a smooth asphalt blend, yeah.
Okay.
And it's hand placed and heavily compacted, so the aggregates are all fine. It should be suitable for scooters or whatever.
Okay, so
It'll
if
be
it,
much larger than I think. It will probably not be easily rideable by rollerblades or scooters. It's really designed for bikes. And the features are larger as a result.
okay. So if like someone wants to take
You
their skate,
could.
you could, but it's kind of riding on a bad pavement road, basically.
No, I think even, I mean, the quality of the pavement will be good. I'm just saying that the size of the features might not lend itself to, a kid on a scooter. Somebody that's really capable probably can handle it just fine.
Okay.
But that's a good question.
That's a great point. I think that's an up and coming thing for one wheel.
Can I propose a fourth option?
Sure.
I absolutely love option A, but I think the process is important for public perception. And one of the things with the rec center was the process. It's a great amenity and we have possibly outgrown it very soon. But we are up against perception still, and we may be for a long time. And that is not only difficult for the town to function and have the support of the community, but it's very difficult for the community to be unified and to be excited about that amenity. I even had a lot of people not come to Berthoud Day because of the poor process, not because they hate the amenity, but they were still disenfranchised. And so I can't forget that. So my fourth option, or option D, would be to approve option A, but staggered. To not put in the pump track now, but wait till after the other amenities have been developed, such as Town Park and Richardson. And once those are done, if we have funds remaining, that we go in and complete the remainder of the project. Because I do think, two things I've seen trends in the market is that we are seeing construction costs come down from high inflation. It's slow, but it is coming down. And then the other trend is that we're headed towards possible economic decline. And we may not be able to do anything past this project, and Richardson may be a dream, or Town Park may be a dream. And so I'd like to say, let's begin phase 1 and say we're going to move toward option A in the full project, but we're going to do it in 2 stages. And make sure those other 2 amenities are fulfilled prior to the pump track and full scope.
So it's like an option C, but you're saying option C right now, but we're going for an A. We're not gonna do any pump track right now, not even a half acre, but when we come in and do it, we do the full acre.
Yes. I think that would get buy-in for this project as well as the other projects we're already working on that we've promised to the community, such as Richardson and Town Park. If we have any deficit or don't follow through on either of those projects because of possible funding or issues that come along, we're gonna have to answer to them for that. And so I wanna make sure all projects have equal opportunity to be successful. And especially since we didn't budget for this full scope, I think it's appropriate to stagger it and move toward it. And that's just trying to be mindful of all things considered.
That's a unique thought. But, okay, I know staff's kind of think of this on the spot. I don't know if this delays anything. Yeah, I think we're just gonna have to vote.
I think what we'll be able to demonstrate to you during our annual budgeting process that'll begin in October, November, is what we're going to be able to fund in the next 2 or 3 years based on our projections. It will be conservative, as you can imagine, based on what we have in the bank today, which is significant for park development, and based on what we think we'll collect in the next few years in terms of future tax revenues. And so I think there is a hybrid option if that's a preference the board prefers. You could say option A is our, we approve option A, but we're only authorizing construction of option C. And then we can show you that cost in a few months and how that relates more specifically to Town Park. Because Town Park is our kind of first priority, next big park project. And then when we think we can fund Richardson in what phases, which we think are in the next just 2 years. So we could approach it that way if you wanted to, or you can wait entirely until the budgeting process. There's, it's a question of timing.
Quick question on that. Will we have to revise our bid? Say we approved option C with the intent for A.
If you approve option C, option A would effectively be a change order. And so.
You inflate that cost of whatever that
So it
contract
costs
is.
us more than the 2.5 million
So
ultimately,
we couldn't
we'd be
agree
spending
to
more
the
money.
costs that have been bid today. We would agree to the costs that have been bid for option C, and then we'd have to negotiate the cost of the addition of the pump track at such time as it was authorized. They may just say, we may go to them and they say, we'll build it for exactly the price we bid before. They may say, hey, costs have come down, material costs have come down, we can do it for less. Or they may say, it's gonna be a lot more. We don't really know. And a lot of that depends on timing. If the decision's made in a couple of months, there's a lot less risk for cost. If we don't do that, for another year or two, who knows what that looks like.
And we could do the opposite, right? We could approve option A, and then if after the budget talks, we decide as a board that it's affecting our budget, then we could say eliminate, do a change order to drop it versus add it.
You could. I would be hesitant to do that. I wouldn't want to sign a contract with a contractor with the expectation that we'd be taking half of their project away from them in the middle. I'd rather start with the base amount and then add on.
Because, over the
As
last 4
appropriate.
years, I've taken pretty good trust in your calculations for our budget. Like you said, we've got the money.
We've always, well, since I've been here, it's not always. But for the 4.5 years I've been here, we've exceeded our revenue projections and we've come in under budget on our expenses in total. And that's not every single line item, but the bottom line has always been significantly net positive. We fully expect that to be the case again this year, which will mean you'll have a little extra money than we even planned for in the budgeting process next year. But you never know, I mean, life could change tomorrow, you know, so.
I guess my reply to me, I think that's a fantastic idea. I think as someone that was critical of the COP thing, to me, this isn't going to the public in the first place. I've heard a lot of support behind the scenes. I mean, there's two in here tonight, none in opposition. But even when there was a lot of opposition, there was people to me that didn't want to come in the meeting, but were supportive. So I kind of look at this a little differently. And yeah, I think we're always going to have some pushback over budgeting and priorities. It doesn't sound like we're reducing anything to make this happen. It might be a little bit more risky, but it seems like everything we have planned going is still planned going. It's just a priority issue.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I think it's important to look at it from the perspective of it really is not we're taking away from one to pay for another. It just may be that we're extending the timeline out for the second. Does that make sense? You know, we're not throwing away a town park as a result of this. But let's say, for whatever reason, we couldn't fund both in the next, 18 months like we expect to as a result of this decision. Maybe we have to do it 24 months instead of 18 months.
For town park.
You know what I'm saying? So it's
Because that would be the next highest one?
Yeah, so I mean, and that was what the master plan, when we adopted in 2018, this was really the first phase of that master plan, was the first phase of Richardson Park and the bike park. That's why it got prioritized. The second priority was town park. That was driven largely because we were removing the old town park pool, and we wanted to put a new amenity back there that was, significant in scale and a water amenity, right? Not a pool, but a really awesome water amenity that's free to the public. People can go out there all summer long and enjoy the water and be out in the park. So that was phase two. And then the next project after that was Richardson. And so that progression is still moving forward. We'll actually have complete design plans for Town Park in October based on our current schedule. And you guys have seen that multiple iterations of that as we've gone through the design. We should, assuming that you budget for the remainder of the design for Richardson, we've gone up to 30%. We're gonna ask you to budget money for, the 100% design plans. Assuming you do that, we'll have those plans done in the middle of next year. And then it's all a question of timing for when they get built. And so it's not that they won't, it just may change the timeline for how that happens. But this was always, at least from the 2018 master plan, this was phase one. So.
Okay. Well, I don't think there's much else to hear but vote, unless there's any final clarifications that may put trustees in a specific option.
No, I'd like to clarify that I think the issue about the rec center wasn't so much about the rec center, it's about financing and how that happened and looked.
Mm-hmm.
This is a cash project, has nothing to do with financing, it's budgeting, and like Chris said, we've got the money, it's just how do we want to spend it.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify my opinion on that.
So, you still want to keep that forward as an option?
I think it's really imperative, especially based on what Administrator Kirk just said about Town Park. Because I think if this project ends up, maybe right now it doesn't seem like it's going to take anything away, but if it ends up taking away from another project that's really important to our community, I think we're gonna have a lot bigger issue on our hands. So we wanna make sure that we're being mindful. If there wasn't an increase, this wouldn't be a big deal, right? Like, it would be a no-brainer. But because of that increase, and because the other projects being in process, I really think it's important that we're not taking away from any other projects that are going on at the same time that are equally important. And if we're talking about bringing people to Berthoud, we've got to get our center updated. We've got to get our town park to be somewhere that's a great place for people to come, and it's our namesake park. So I definitely think, yeah.
Okay. So I guess we could start there, option D. If you want to move on that, Trustee Sorcelli, see if you get a second. Or we can just do a poll and see if any trustees prefer D over their original top option.
I will move to approve option D, the hybrid option to approve option A in a staggered approach, and direct staff to proceed with construction of the Richardson Bike Park, beginning with option C and following with option A at a later time.
Is there a second on that? Having no second, the motion fails. Is there any trustees want to propose a different, or we can just start top to bottom? Anyone want to propose an option A motion?
I'll make the motion.
Okay. Go ahead. Do you want to move to the option?
Yeah, I'll move to approve option A.
Option A, and direct staff to proceed with construction of the Richardson Bike Park.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Trustee Hardy. Okay, so Trustee Murphy has moved on option A. Trustee Hardy has seconded. So we have a motion on the table now. Is there any final discussion on that?
I got a comment.
Sure.
To move on that, I feel strongly that we should not put any restrictions with events. If we're gonna build it and create it as put Berthoud on the map, let's attract and put it on the map.
Well, like Chris said, the events would probably be most likely.
It's coordinated through town, right? But I don't
Until we
see.
build the other park with the larger parking lot, so that
Right.
we'd be able to handle the traffic. And I'm fine with that. I mean, in the time being, until we get Richardson completed, I would say no events, major events at least. I mean, you could have like a birthday party event over there, but no major events are gonna attract hundreds of people until we get the other big parking lot built.
Right.
I would
And
agree
that's a
with
different
that.
story.
Okay, so Trustee Murphy agrees with that. You amend the motion or?
Yeah, I'll amend the motion
Okay.
to
Include that.
suspend events until a time when there is additional parking and services to support events at the bike park.
Okay, does Trustee Hardy agree with that?
Second.
Okay, so that motion now has been amended to have that events clause. We have a motion on the table, it's been seconded, anything else? Clerk, we have a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Ayers,
Yes.
trustee Sorcelli,
No?
trustee Murphy,
Yes?
trustee Butler,
Yes.
trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Karspeck.
Yes. All right. Thank you, staff. Bike lane will be supported on option A. I think it's clear to the people in the audience here, I just want to make it very clear here that those that voted no are not voting against a bike park or recreation. They were just other options they wanted to prefer. Okay, thank you. Is there anything else for staff on that?
No, thank you.
Okay, we will move now on to reports. We'll start off with Trustee Hardy.
Nothing to report.
Trustee Sorcelli.
Nothing to report?
Trustee Grace has got, or maybe Representative Grace, Trustee Murphy.
No reports?
Trustee Ayers.
The port committee met last week, went over some trail signage improvements for the different bike amenities going around town, just to make sure everything was named and measured out. They gave feedback on possible signage, so I assume that's gonna be coming up soon, at least ideas. Everything looked pretty good. There was pretty long discussion about it, so pretty good comments all the way around. There was a presentation about the possible future boardwalk next to the lake at the future Richard Park development, which was agreed upon as a good thing to move forward as far as port was concerned, and everything looked amazing. So I hope that's moving or gonna come out with pictures. Everything was really good. The Jaskowski property was brought up, and there was no consensus about what to do because of the deed restrictions, and so that's going to be discussed and reviewed again in the future, just to see what can be done with that property, because it's very limited, the use of that property.
We did a tour of that, right?
We are going to do.
And then I guess I had a question that came up and a concern that came up about the trail connection that is supposed to connect Highway 10 with the Heron Lakes development, where there was a locked gate for a while and then finally the gate was opened. And I've been over there and a couple of people have contacted me about concerns because the supposed trail connection is just basically large inch gravel. And I'm concerned about ADA restrictions on that. Is that supposed to be an HOA provided trail? And if it is that gravel ADA compliant for bikes, pedestrians, etc.
And this is where?
The connection between the south end of the Heron Lakes, between the golf course and County Road 10.
Yeah,
Which has been problematic for,
I've
you know,
experienced those
however
big
long.
rocks.
Yeah.
Is that?
I guess before you answer,
That is not the, so just really brief history. The plan for Heron Lakes is a concrete trail through there. There was a push from the prior town board to get a temporary trail installed. That was not our expectation of what would be installed. And no, I don't believe those 1-inch rocks are ADA compliant. They are temporary and they are there for, I don't know how that relates to ADA compliance and that they were never a planned improvement. But again, my understanding was that was not what they were wanting to install. So I went by and looked at them last week. I have a meeting with the developer on Thursday, and that'll be one of the topics we're gonna be discussing.
yeah, because, I mean, ADA compliance aside, if you're riding a road bike,
Exactly.
you can't ride on that gravel.
Yeah, and I don't know that anything they design through there is gonna be anything other than crusher fines. But crusher fines, you can at least ride a bike on.
Right. Yeah, well, if it's gonna be
Only
replaced,
installing concrete.
sure, right.
Not until they do that, until they actually develop that south end.
And not to pick on them in any way, shape, or form, but another concern I had, and this may, once again, I keep doing this, but this may have been better in an easy email to you, but is the lake that they own now public access?
Which lake?
The main lake next to the golf course. Does the town have surface
There are
rights?
technically three reservoirs there. Lone Tree Reservoir, they don't own any of those reservoirs. They do own the irrigation pond that's in the center of the golf course, right off of Heron Lakes Parkway. It's like hole number 3, I think. Holes number 2 and 3. That irrigation pond though is exactly what it's for. It's not a lake. The 3 reservoirs are owned by ditch companies. 2 of them, McNeil and Welch, are the handy ditch reservoirs we discussed. They don't own or control the surface rights for all of those reservoirs. They do have some surface rights on, I think, Welch for non-motorized boats, and that's open to their Metro District residents. Lone Tree Reservoir, they did purchase or are leasing the surface rights. I think it's Home Supply, Consolidated Home Supply that owns that reservoir. And that is technically open to the public, but at a fee. So it's not closed to the public. It is more expensive if you are not a member of the Metro District,
So
or resident of the Metro District.
my concern, and the concern that I've heard from various citizens, is was there an expectation that the fee for non-residents would be affordable or would be used for day passes? Because it's my understanding that they only offer to the public a yearly pass, which is rather cost prohibitive. Was it ever the expectation that they were going to allow day passes, et cetera, that would be not cost prohibitive to, if I want to go take my paddleboard or my canoe out there?
I think the answer to that is that I think that is their intent long term. I don't want to speak on behalf of them. They own they own the surface rights. They have some legal obligations to make it available to the public. In that the Metro District is the one that's leasing those, and so they need to be available to the public. How they do that, much like Heritage Ridge doesn't allow a day pass to use the pool, but you can buy a seasonal pool pass there if you're not a member of that Metro District. It's not that different than the reservoir, except that the reservoir access is much more expensive. But I think, as I understood it, and this was from years ago when they got the Marina Club annexation approved, they still intend to build a Marina Club. Part of it is that they just don't have regular posted access out there. There's not an easy way to get people in and out of there. But I think that was their intent. But I mean, I'm speculating, I guess, in some respect. There was no obligation to. Maybe that's the better answer.
When you
There was
mean
no
by-
obligation to offer day passes.
You mean with
That I-
Birdsall, maybe, could you ask that, or?
Yeah, I'm happy to
Yeah.
ask him that
And
question.
then transparency.
We have a long list of stuff to talk
Right.
about, so there's no.
Because I've heard very similar, and how to get to that, and I couldn't give the person the answer. Where do I go to sign up? So, all that kind of stuff,
The information is on their Metro District website.
which is not their regular Heron Lakes website, right? 'Cause I couldn't find it on that, okay.
That's correct.
Because I always thought there would be a reduced rate for town, there'd be a general public, and then a reduced rate for town citizens, and then your metro, your lowest rate.
Right.
Or free, whatever. But yeah, how this is played out is,
There is a tiered structure, you know,
There is?
even as a Metro District resident, there's still a fee to use the reservoir. I don't know if there's a fee for non-motorized craft, but there is, like, if you wanna put a boat on. And then there's a more expensive fee for members of the golf course, but who are not Metro District residents, and then there's a higher fee for non-residents, non-members.
okay. Nothing special for town.
Right.
Yeah,
And my concern is not the term structure or the fees, but the people I've talked to, and honestly, my own concern is that what has seemingly happened is that, yes, it's open to the public for a fee, but that fee is cost prohibitive and therefore it is not actually open to the public. And that's my concern. So is there any way, I understand that it's kind of past, but is there any way that the town, or is there bylaws in effect that limit those kinds of fees when the town is concerned?
not really.
Okay.
I mean, I think, you know, there's some reasonableness to their fees, and they need to be consistent with what someone who is a member of that Metro District is paying, right? Because members of the Metro District pay a significant amount of tax money in order to utilize those facilities. And so they need to be commensurate with what somebody there might be paying. And if there's a fee associated with the Metro District member, or the Metro District residents using that, then you kind of calculate all that, and I think that's generally, as I understand, that's kind of the reasonable way to approach things. But I'm not aware of, like, we don't have a limitation on what they could charge in that way.
So knock on some doors, make some good friends with the people that live on the lake, and
Well, if that's something, you know, maybe we could discuss that too when the Metro District policy comes back, because maybe that's something, if the board just agrees, we could slide in.
One of the things, as an aside, one of the things we discussed as part of the Welch and McNeil Reservoir development ideas was that the town would work with the developer and the Handy Ditch Company to have public access to those reservoirs.
Mhm.
And the town would help fund the service rights lease, but that would then make those reservoirs available to the public in a totally different way than larger.
Accessible, yeah, sure.
And they're not currently accessible to the public at all.
That's a good point. So to add a comment to this.
No, I'm good.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I'm done. Thank you.
I was on the planning commission as all that happened. And I do remember pretty specific conversations with the expectation to allow residents reasonable access. That's very subjective. And I think that's the problem, because we didn't really put more clarity to that.
Yeah, and I think that's always the challenge. Even when we talk about affordability, that's a relative term, right? That may not be affordable to me, but it might be affordable to somebody else.
Well,
It
fracking,
might be affordable to me, but not to
necessarily
somebody else.
reasonable, that reasonable term always pops up, it's hard to define.
Yeah, so
So
unless there's a very specific number, that's a pretty broad
Right.
term.
So I guess I would suggest or request that you, when you have the conversation with them, how does the public gain access now? Because I understand the opportunity with the marina, which was always the expectation, but you know, that who knows when that's gonna happen.
Right.
So how and when and where, you know, do we get that?
That we can easily do.
Because there was access to the north side, I forget that road. But
That
it
was back when the state, so the state of Colorado used to control the surface rights
Right.
of Lone Tree. They decided they were not going to continue to pay for the surface rights, and the Metro District basically bought them up.
Right. And that road and all those ramps and parking.
The state
Shut it
access
down.
that was there on the north end, or on the west end, was closed.
Correct, right. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, I was done. Yeah. Thank you. That actually was where I was trying to get to that, right? Is what conversation can we have with them to make sure that they better define reasonable, and if the idea is to have public access, well, when's that gonna happen, right? Because if it's dependent upon the marina, well, that could be 10, 15 years, and then they're not really fulfilling their obligation to have public access.
But again, I think for what it's worth, they do not have an obligation to provide public access in the way that you're describing.
Okay.
Because we haven't described it yet.
No, I don't think you have the ability to describe it at this point. They control the surface rights. They have the right under state statute to set fees for those. Yeah, and it's not publicly.
So we can't come in as a town government and say, whoa, what is reasonable? That was vague and now it's over.
I don't think so.
So we should have done it when we annexed? When was the right time? I'm sorry,
Probably
didn't-
during.
That's a great
Yeah,
point.
I was gonna say probably during the service plan approval for the Metro District.
Do you know when the surface rights are up?
No, I don't.
Maybe it's 3 years, maybe it's 300.
I would guess that it's
think
probably
it was
not a short term. It's probably not a short term agreement, but I honestly don't know. That agreement would have been between the Metro District and the ditch company. But I don't think that we have the ability to go in now and impose some restriction on fees. For what it's worth.
Okay, Trustee Butler, anything else?
Just one comment in regards to budget, which we're gonna talk about here in the next few months. In relation to approving bike park, which I am sensitive to Trustee Sorcelli's comments in the way that, so in my profession of expertise, there's a lot of forecasting and modeling with real estate markets. And this area is named as a high risk to see some potential fall in values, and that's definitely gonna impact the budget. So it's something for us to be aware of in forecasting.
I trust you, I believe you. Cool, anything else?
That's all.
Not cool, but thank you for that. I only have one thing, and I didn't bring it with me, but in the MPO meeting, the city of Loveland used to have an app, kind of, it was a website, but you could walk around in northern Colorado and anywhere in any of the municipalities and pin a location and make comments, so sidewalk's not right, or even something off the streets. I kind of was a part of this pilot, as part of the Bike and Ped Coalition, and I thought it was great. They didn't end up going ahead with it. The MPO picked it up, so I will forward out that link, but there'll be, there is a website already and a QR code that'll take you there, but then any citizen can kind of notify the MPO, and then they respectively will notify town staff, apparently. I don't know if you guys know about this, but sorry, Keith, in advance, but yeah, I think it's a great tool, and hopefully, and I'm sure you can say positive stuff too, which I will. So. The other thing was just an update on the MPO about VanGo. I'd love to have the MPO come in and just give a general overview of what they do and kind of the new stuff since COVID. But the VanGo program is really slowed down with COVID. In the inception of it, it was the only, I just learned this, it was the only one in the United States of its kind that was kind of taken over by an MPO, but is totally self-funded. So the MPO runs the VanGo program, which is, if you haven't seen them, it's a rideshare program. But it is totally paid for by user fees, so no government subsidy, which is pretty interesting. And they reduced their rates for a while during COVID. I think they actually even made them free. And now we're trying to come back and make this work again and add some routes. So apologies, I'm kind of vague on the details right now, but I'd love to get the MPO on the agenda to just come in for like a 20-minute presentation. That's cool, everyone, and that's not a priority, but maybe sometime during the winter.
Something you said makes me remember something that I want to bring up.
I'm done, so go ahead.
I don't know if you've been on the news lately. Montbello just promoted like their little rideshare thing, and they've got an app. So I might go check out that app to see what it was about, because I was thinking, okay, we need something for bats and rats in the area. Well, the company that wrote their app has written like a whole bunch of apps, like Breckenridge and other communities in the state. So I was wondering if we could look into contacting that app company about what it would cost to get something written for the Berthoud area that raft and bats could utilize together somehow.
Isn't FHU where they working on with Louisville? So are they still looking into that for us?
It's one of the updates I have for you tonight.
Okay.
If you'd like me to start there.
Okay.
I have a short list. I'll try to be brief tonight. I'll start with transit. The transit feasibility study and master plan that we've been working on over the last year. The last few steps that we've had over the last 2 weeks, we've been meeting with microtransit providers. Microtransit is what it sounds like. It's smaller vehicles driven by software and algorithms to try and increase efficiency, make it easier to get rides. It functions very similar to an Uber service, and so those companies can either provide their software solution, and you can use them with your existing fleet and drivers, or you can bring them in for a turnkey solution where they run the vehicles, they provide the drivers, they brand them according to your community, so the rider doesn't have any, doesn't see any difference from that perspective. It looks like a town vehicle, but it's operated by them. We've been talking to Raft. Raft is also looking at a software solution for what they do. They do what I would call paratransit, right, where they're focused primarily on seniors and adults with disabilities. And we're focused more on transit, which is just moving anybody around town, outside of a single occupancy vehicle. And so we've looked at a couple of different solutions. We're hoping to bring some options to you to consider in October. So
It'd be cool if you could get like one solution, like you select door to door or route.
and they can do both.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the cool thing about, technology is changing transit dramatically and very rapidly, driven mostly by Uber and Lyft, right? They kind of pioneered, I think, anyway, those software programs and algorithms to increase efficiency and how you schedule and plan rides. But they can do those. That software can run fixed routes. It can run point to point. It can actually even set up like virtual bus stops where if you have 2 or 3 people in the same area request a ride, they can all meet in one location. A driver can pick up all 3 of them at the same time and go somewhere. There's all kinds of really cool functionality that I think, that technology is just emerging, but I think in the next few years it's really going to change how transit operates everywhere. But anyway, we're hoping to bring some of that kind of cool, exciting technology to you here in the very near future for consideration. The broadband project that we've been working on, I just thought I'd give you a really brief update. As you know, we've been working with Meade, Milliken, Johnstown on the possibility of expanding a fiber network in all 4 communities. We picked a private provider through a request for proposals process. The 4 communities got together and selected a private provider, was Allo Fiber. Those negotiations are ongoing, but have stalled. For a lot of reasons I won't get into tonight, but driven primarily between what we as the communities defined as a ubiquitous build, which was every home and residence and business in the community, and what they defined as ubiquitous build, which was almost every home and business. And so there's some debate about what that is. In parallel with that, we've decided at the staff level to meet with Loveland Pulse. Again, we talked to them during that process, the 4 communities did, but to explore what a partnership with them might look like. So just want to let you know that that's still moving, but is moving slowly. And again, with the goal of providing fiber to every resident and business in town, or at least the ability to access fiber if they want it. We will be bringing back the first round of oil and gas regulations for you to consider. As you remember, Mike Foote, the attorney that we hired to help us with that process, suggested that we break that rulemaking process into kind of 3 categories, the first being location and siting of oil and gas facilities. So we bring that back to you at the next meeting for him to make a presentation about some of the recommendations that he has and get your feedback and start to open that up for public dialogue. We'll be bringing water policy back to you on October 11th with Pete Johnson from Brandish and Reich. He'll cover kind of Water 101 for our newer trustees, water law in Colorado at a high level. He'll cover how does our raw water system function, what are our water rights, how are they delivered to the town, how do we use them. We'll talk about what our raw water management plan looks like for the future and how all that is impacted by our current water policy. And then he'll also talk through some other creative water raw water acquisition ideas like alternative transfer mechanisms, looking east for water instead of west, and some other ideas that we're working on right now. So we'll be bringing that back to you at the first meeting in October. And then the district attorney, Gordon McLaughlin, has also reached out. He would like to make a presentation about the new Colorado prosecutorial public information dashboard that's being launched in Larimer County. They asked for a couple of different dates. It's probably a 20 to 30 minute presentation according to their staff. They said they could shorten it if the board would prefer that it be a little bit shortened. But they've requested October 11th. So unless there's some opposition to that, we'll work with them. I think we will ask for a shorter presentation to the extent that they can, but that'll be coming to you soon.
I think anytime a politician wants to get in front of us, that's great, so.
And then just a reminder, next Monday and Tuesday, we'll be doing our board strategic planning retreat with Greg Pyburn. I sent out an email today about that, just as a reminder to you guys, but really looking forward to that process. It's always been positive and frankly, I think really motivating in the past, and looking forward to another good opportunity to go through and kind of talk about what this board's priorities are and where we should be focusing our time and attention for the next 18 to 24 months. So 6 o'clock next Monday and Tuesday at the fire district, not here.
Cool.
That's it from me.
Awesome. Attorney Smith, anything?
I have nothing, Your Honor.
Okay, thanks. Anything else, trustees, before I adjourn? It was a great meeting, very thorough, and I think we have a good cross-section of the community on that, so appreciate all that discussion tonight. So I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Have a great night.